chair said he would be a couple minutes late, and so he said go ahead and start without him. Not that the first item on the agenda is not important. Additions and deletions? Do you want to?
We have one proposed change to the agenda. We currently have regional dispatch presentation on for 8:50. As you can see, we have our guests here at 7. They've asked if you would consider moving this up. We suggest maybe 4.5, so in between number 4 and 5. So after those wastewater committee interviews, if you're agreeable, we'll do that then.
Is that okay? Marilee, are you all set with that?
I think so. What number is it that we're moving?
Well, we're moving 10 to
Okay, thank you.
4.5.
Okay.
Okay, next item is public comment. Any comments other than what might already be on the agenda? Yes, Dawn?
Dawn Francis, town of Hinesburg, and I just wanted to thank Trevor Lashua for his service to the community of Hinesburg. I think he's served the community well, and we're going to miss him very much. And if I can be of service to the community, I serve as town manager in Colchester. Have lived in Hinesburg since age 13, so I'm very proud of Hinesburg and its future and what you've done, but happy to help you folks out if you'd like it.
And you were a member of the committee when the hiring committee for
Correct.
Trevor, I think,
I
at
didn't
that time.
participate in the interviews, but I helped design the process, the questions, yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Is there? I think we'll all recognize that, Trevor.
What?
Your service to the town.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Okay. We're good.
Item 4, the interviews and appointments for the at-large members for water and wastewater. Hello, Tom. Allocation. So we had originally 4, but apparently now there's only 3.
Right. Ronnie Estee had to withdraw for family reasons, so we have just the 3 other members. Rob Bast, as you may know from the materials, couldn't make it tonight, but supplied some additional information in the time in between. And I see Dan and Peter are both here.
Do we need to recap the committee at all, or?
Ken, if you want, you established this committee on April 3rd. There were about 6 bullets that were part of the scope of that committee. The major one of those was essentially how do we want to give out, whatever our capacity ends up being, how do we want to give that out, and to look at some of the technical pieces such as there are other allocation ordinances in effect in other municipalities. There are things we can steal, borrow, amend. What do we want to use as a baseline in terms of how we give out? We give you some suggestions there, where that should go, and that's a technical piece in terms of where we actually nest that based on some case law, and then a few other things, including changes to the fee structure and any other duties as assigned. And then at the last meeting, we also talked maybe about a phase 2 that would look more at the capital end after we got through this phase 1 task. And there are other members of the committee that have been appointed at this point based on that setup. Tom and Andrea will represent the select board, Jeff French from the planning commission, and Sarah Murphy from the DRB. So that leaves the 3 at-large members that we're filling seats for.
Yes, Marilee?
I still am finding nothing in my packet about Dan. There's a lot about Rob, about 4 different documents, but, and we had the thing from Peter last time, but I'm not finding anything. No, I checked, it's not.
Well, there was one PDF document, that's what it was.
It was
Yep.
a long email trail, like.
Oops. Yeah,
Can you pull that up?
there should be, right, 4A. That should be everyone that we had as of the time we created that one PDF. So Peter's page 3,
Oh, 4A, I see,
Yep.
okay.
and then Ronnie was page 4,
Okay, thank you, 4A.
and then Dan is page 6. And these are all in alphabetical order by last name.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I think we know Rob Bast is not here. We can certainly discuss him first, if we'd like. Andrea, I think you suggested he would be a good
Yeah.
member of this committee.
Yep, I mean, Rob was on the board when the first allocation thing came up. I know I had mentioned when we talked about creating a committee that would have some additional members, I felt it was important to have members who could get up to speed really fast, because we had a short time frame, so people that are somewhat familiar with it, and Rob, of course, was the first person that I thought of. I actually probably asked a half a dozen people to, who I thought, mostly former select board members, and other people who, not to say that, I mean, I think the candidates that we have are certainly qualified and can learn, but I expect that there'll be homework to do on this committee, so it's not, it'll be a little bit of work, and I think Rob would be a good candidate.
I agree. I had many conversations over the years with Rob, not specifically about this particular task, but about the water system, its creation, his part in formation of this water system. His extensive knowledge, I think, will be a great asset to the work that we're asking to be done on very short notice, and to Andrea's point, hit the ground running and go. So I agree.
I'm happy with Rob. I'm happy with all three candidates, I think. They all bring different perspectives, so I'd just as soon appoint them all. If you're looking for a motion, I'd do it. If you want to interview everybody else.
We could interview too, if necessary. Now, the next on the list is Peter. I don't know if anybody has any questions, or Peter, you could just briefly tell us your interest in this committee.
I'm interested in the committee for various reasons, actually. I'm really concerned that the people that are in the village now have some equitable way to improve the treatment, the way their contribution needs to be done without having some unfair burden on it. I think it's really important that we explore every avenue and don't just feel we have to have very rapid and as much development as we can to pay for this thing. I think it's important that the village build out in a planned manner, and that it build out at a reasonable pace. We don't have any more area to build again, and I think we really want to get it right. I'm not here to try to stop the developments that are in the line at all. I'm here to just try to make sure it's done right, and also that we really get an environmentally sound result. Because I care a lot about the lake, and I want to make sure that we don't get shortcuts if we can avoid them. I'm not credentialed engineer or anything. I've had a lot of experience in engineering, a lot of experience with stuff like this, obviously with the town, and I feel I could be up to speed very quickly.
Okay. Any more questions for Peter?
No, I would agree with that, and getting up to speed quickly, I think you're already there in terms of knowing what the work is that you're being asked of. So I do believe that you care deeply about water quality in the lake. To your point, I know that. So having that voice as part of the work that gets done, I think would be valuable.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. Next on the list was Veronica St. Ronnie, and I'm sorry to hear she's, had to withdraw, because she would have brought some good experience, development experience too. So next is Dan. Hi, Dan. Do you want to, you're new to me anyway. So
yeah, sure.
Maybe you could give us a quick little overview of your, what brings you to this committee?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'll introduce myself first, because like you were saying, I don't think we've ever really met before or talked too much. So just to give you guys a little bit of background about who I am. First of all, I'm a little tired right now because I have a 5-day-old baby at home, baby girl. So it's, little sleep the past few nights. But, in addition to that, I've got a son that's almost 4 years old. I've lived in Hinesburg for almost 10 years now. It'll be 10 years this summer. I grew up in Vermont. I grew up in the Middlebury area. And kind of what has interested me about joining this committee is a few different things. First of all, I'm interested in joining a board. I've been coaching lacrosse in the town of Hinesburg for the past 6 years now. I'm not going to be doing that this year, so I've been coming to a lot more select board meetings and really learning more about the town. And like I had mentioned, I'm interested in joining a board, and I think this would be a good opportunity to get some experience. Also because it's not a real long-term thing, so I think it'll be, kind of good introduction to that, and then, after this, I could kind of make a better decision on a board that I would want to join. In addition to that, a few other things that kind of interested me about this are something that you had mentioned, Andrea, and then Trevor as well. You had mentioned in one meeting that I attended that it's going to be a lot of information and data collecting and taking that information and giving that to you guys to help make an informed decision. That's something that interests me because I kind of do that in a similar way at my current position. In digital marketing, I gather information on marketing budgets and present that information to clients to help them make informed decisions about their business. And then another thing that you had mentioned, Trevor, is taking a look at what we have now and figuring out how to make that more efficient. When you had talked about that, that's something that really interested me, kind of looking at what we can do with what we already have. And then also throughout the past few meetings that when I've listened to you guys talk about it, it made me realize how important this is. And it is an issue that the town faces, and so to be able to be a part of that and help do something for the town is something that I would like to do.
Any particular questions?
Well, I always welcome new voices, new faces. I appreciate that you're stepping forward to offer your time with a 5-day-old in your household, so I can appreciate that a few years ago. I think that the idea of the data collection could be very helpful to the group. York, do you have any concerns over maybe, we talk a lot about being up to speed really quick with the work at hand. Do you have any concerns over maybe not, I don't know, to use a pun, getting in over your head on this in terms of the topic matter as opposed to, knowing what your skills are and how they'll be useful for the committee? That sounds great. But the topic matter itself and getting up to speed there.
I don't have any concerns about that. I have gone and looked to see what information was available on the town website, and I've read through that information. And I know that you had mentioned at a previous meeting about coming in and talking with Trevor to kind of get up to speed about, what has been done in the past. And so, I don't have any concerns about that. It's definitely, that's why I want to be on the board, is
Sure.
so I can learn more about it.
To jump in and learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is Eric going to be sitting with us on this committee or not?
He'll be part of the staff team.
Right.
Right.
So I think the staff team could be Trevor, Renee, Eric, this guy
Alex.
here,
This guy right here in the
Alex.
blue shirt, too. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we could entertain a motion, or motions.
I'll make a motion to appoint Rob Bast, Peter Erb, and Dan
Meyer.
Meyer.
I get that a lot.
Sorry.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? More discussion? No? All in favor of those appointments in this motion, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? Congratulations, Dan.
Thank you, guys.
We'll look to send out scheduling emails this
Yeah.
week and start that process
So,
as soon as possible.
so what would we'll schedule a meeting and then maybe a packet of information? And then will they then have a chair, or,
Yep.
I guess a chair?
Have them elect,
Yeah.
have the group elect a chair and,
Work through the structure of the open meeting.
Yeah.
yep.
Well, I hope it can be a working meeting and we're not stuck with making motions and, I mean, it's a work meeting.
Yeah,
It's not we're not talking about policy. We have work to do
Yeah.
and I agree that there should be somebody to chair the meeting and keep us on track, but I really see it as a working session.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Could be something the committee discusses when they get together and determine.
Yes,
I would agree, and I would hope that that would be the case,
Yeah.
and not bog down into sort of the structure of it all.
right.
So the next item is the regional dispatch presentation with Joe Colangelo from Shelburne Town Manager, Don Colchester Town Manager, and Charlie Baker, CCRP. Can you get a little closer?
Not without starting rumors, but, Charlie Baker with the Regional Planning Commission here in Chittenden County. So, I think just to give you a background, the towns that run dispatch operations, including Colchester and Shelburne, but there are 5 other towns that have dispatch staff in Chittenden County, last summer decided to look at whether they could do it more efficiently and effectively together. Is that the revised memo?
This is the February 26th
Oh,
memo.
thank you.
We have the February 2nd one in the packets.
Yeah, so,
FAQ sheet. We've been having some Dropbox issues, hence old school.
Thank you. So those towns gathered together, put some money together. We hired a consultant as a group to look at the issue. They reported out at the end of January and really felt like it does make sense to move forward. The towns after that asked each of their select boards to appoint a member to a joint survey committee with the idea of setting up a union municipal district. However, one key point at the same time was there are towns that have dispatch staff and there are towns that contract for dispatch services. So it was really important to them to make sure that we got out and communicated with every town in Chittenden County. Every town, one way or another, uses dispatch services. And so we really wanted to communicate what was happening, but also, I think, just have a little face-to-face time because invariably there have been questions and or concerns that have come up and wanted the opportunity to address those in person. So the memo really just gives you a real quick, I'll just touch on the key points here about why they're moving ahead, why we're moving ahead with a countywide dispatch operation is really about staffing primarily. So right now we're both over and understaffed. Each town outside of Burlington only has 1 dispatcher on staff, at a given shift. So that's fine unless something happens in that town, then they're probably understaffed. At the same time though, that means there's 8 dispatchers on duty all the time on every single shift, which is really overstaffed for the demands that exist within our county. Also, mutual aid issues. Right now, each one of those dispatchers in a given town, they're aware, usually by radio or so, of what services are available within their town, but they can't see if maybe there is an ambulance service that is closer, right across the town boundary to the incident than their own might be. So we're really looking at a computer-aided dispatch system that would make it easier to get the service there faster. The training and better support and career opportunities for the staff is a big consideration. Dispatchers don't have much of a career track right now in Chittenden County. They got hired as a dispatcher and that's really it. There's no place else for them to go. Looking at this combined model allows for supervisors and a director where there would be more of a career ladder, and also just a lot more support for the dispatchers as a profession, as a team. And then also being able to follow and stick with particularly the fire and rescue personnel in response to an incident. Right now, they're kind of dispatched and let go. So being able to stick with them through the incident would get us up to really what the standards are nationally of what you're supposed to do. And then the final bullet there really talks about the fact that, well, actually this isn't really too relevant to Hinesburg, but for other towns in the county, there's a two-stage system. So even in Burlington, your 911 call goes to the Williston State Police, then they find out what's happening, and then they get a hold of a Burlington dispatcher. That's true for most of the towns. It's not true for Shelburne. You were fortunate and lucky in Hinesburg that your dispatch is done through Shelburne, which is a PSAP. So when you call 911, it goes right to Shelburne, and they are able to dispatch. So you guys, you and Charlotte and Shelburne are really, I think those are the three towns or so that you do PSAP for.
Yeah, just to add that, in terms of just delivery of the service, really Hinesburg and Shelburne experience the best possible world right now. So the future, what we're looking at will kind of put the entire county on par with basically what Shelburne and Hinesburg are experiencing now.
Yep. And kind of turning over the page here, so they looked at a lot of different governance structures, really a lot of interest in how those towns can share ownership of the service. And that comes with all the good side and all the bad side, right? That also means costs and responsibility for the service. And on the back is just a little bit of the schedule to give you a sense of where, what's happening. Right now, the Union Municipal District agreement is being drafted. Hopefully that's done in the next month or two. Some engagement with dispatchers, and then a lot of work on the technical side, the software, the radios, and really developing those operational costs and capital costs and a budget. And all that is really done with the intent of trying to get to the fall with some good numbers and some good conversations. And this is, you know, so there's kind of a major bullet for the select boards or councils with dispatch operations, and then the select boards who contract, because you know, you're also going to have at least some weight in the conversation and review it, because we'll want to have a costing formula for those towns that own it, but also those that contract with it, so you know what is happening and can weigh in. And I think we're also trying to make sure that in the agreement, there is some ability for the contracting towns to have some voice in the service, both on the decision-making level at the board, but also as we've been talking about having, I don't know if it's a public safety advisory committee, but really have the police chiefs, the fire chiefs, the rescue chiefs be able to respond and react to the dispatch operation and say, hey, you did that well, you need to improve this. Those are the customer service feedback. There needs to be a strong process for that to happen. So anyway, we're kind of leading up to recommendations in the fall, and then the select boards that might be voting on this and then bringing it to town meeting in March for town-wide votes in those towns to join or not. And then, of course, the last bullet is really, assuming that's a positive vote, then kind of operationalizing everything, hiring staff, and really ramping up to start at the earliest July 1, 2018. And the reality is there'll be some sort of phasing in. We can't combine 8 operations all at once, so it may be combine a couple towns, add a third, add a fourth, over, and who knows how long that might take 18 months to kind of phase everybody in, because there's a lot of also kind of glossing over just the operational issues in terms of how dispatch relate, particularly to police officers, where they're embedded right now, and maybe 7 or 8 different versions of that in each of the towns. So getting consistency and some of those operational changes. So that's what's happening. Wanted to make sure you were aware of it and had an opportunity to ask any questions. And I know Joe and Dawn may want to pipe in with anything else, or fire away.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have 2 immediately off the top of my head. One, how does Burlington Dispatch play into this? Maybe they do, maybe they don't.
Yep.
And 2, how does this impact the operation of individual departments? So Shelburne's police force, or how chief costs here in Hinesburg, or, you know, right on down the line, does it impact at all? Or is it business as normal? It's just we're consolidating how we're dispatching.
Yeah.
Is there any correlation there?
So let me start. Burlington is definitely a part of this, has gone through their city council. They're participating member in it. You know, they're the most heavily staffed and have the biggest demand.
That was my understanding.
And so they're still going to have the biggest draw on the service as it gets set up. And then in terms of the impact on the police or fire, Joe, you want to take that one?
I might be able to help on this. My understanding is that at least there'll have to be some sort of unification on call signals and some standard operating procedures. Obviously, you can't have one central dispatch center have to memorize 8 different municipalities' operating procedures. So there will have to be some amount of unification there. In terms of the numbers of dispatchers, I think Andrea was at least at one of our presentations. Just to put that in perspective, right now we're at 8 full-time employees typically on in Chittenden County. What we think is doable is 5. The city of Boston, for example, has 5 on at any given time. So I think that, you know, 8 too many on for Chittenden County? Yes.
Might be.
So I think the, you know, the one nice thing about the national consultant that we have is they were really able to bring some credibility in terms of what are the trends nationwide.
I would imagine those 8 are probably doing other things in between the dispatching, so, but yeah.
In terms of the impact on police services, that's something we're evaluating right now, because it's different in every community. There's
That's what I was thinking.
backfilling of different services. Some do burn permits.
Yeah.
Some are there 24/7, some are not. There's some that are doing record keeping and assisting with the admin duties, some are not. So that's the kind of thing where we actually put that survey out to all the police chiefs to tell us, right, what are you going to need to backfill your operation, and you're going to have to budget for that. Okay.
I think that's a big thing. What of those extra services can go to the regional entity and which need to stay local, and kind of teasing it apart, because it is a restructuring of how they operate right now.
We recognize that's a concern.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of what the added cost would be for Hinesburg, what the additional cost? I'm assuming that it
I
would
don't know why
cost
Joe
more than
passed
what
it
we're
back.
paying right now.
I think the honest answer is we do not, and I mean, I think everybody wants it to be less cost, but there's so many questions about how much of the service goes to the regional, how much stays local. And as Dawn just noted, it may vary a little bit depending on what services each town is doing. These are the ones that have dispatch. I think with the contracting towns, I think there's every interest in trying to keep it the same or better.
Well, you indicated there would be more administrative levels. That's going to be more money.
So one thing, actually, let me, sorry. The one fact I skipped over was right now, I talked about 8 at any given shift. There's a total of 45 full-time dispatchers in Chittenden County. The consultants thought that it could be done with 38 full-time staff. So that includes those admin people. We're not talking about hiring additional people. We're talking about existing personnel serving in different roles. I say personnel, you know, kind of not necessarily a person, but that position. So we're not talking about extra staff to do this. I think that's a very important point to make sure you hear.
Right. It sounds like, from what Joe said, what we have now is really a good situation. So because we just call Shelburne and we've got the dispatch right there, I'm hoping that we don't have to sacrifice to make it better for other towns. I'm hoping that we also get a benefit out of this. Also be interested to know what Al Barber and Frank Koss think about it.
Sorry, in terms of the service, just so it's clear, it's for someone to call 911 and then get dispatched. It's one-stop shopping. Your 911 call goes to Shelburne Dispatch, and that same dispatcher picks up the phone and dispatches out the fire or the police service. And that's something only Hinesburg and Shelburne currently get. My assumption is there's a number of people in Hinesburg, for example, who work in Essex or Burlington or some other places, so there may be a benefit for other communities to have the same level of service as Hinesburg and Shelburne do currently. Hinesburg and Shelburne will continue to have that same one-stop shopping, but these other communities and other places that people are working and going towards will also have the benefit.
Example right here.
And have you consulted with our police chief and fire chief?
I believe I know that Chief Barber and I have spent many a times together lately talking about it, and I know Chief Cost has been involved too, so certainly they're part of the mix.
I'm on the technical committee, so, yep.
Okay.
And I think that's been very important from the outside is that for those urban towns and Shelburne, I won't count you as totally urban, but have been very conscious of making sure that all of the service personnel were represented in the process and not just them. So they've been trying to keep the blinders off of this.
Will there be offices stay in the same places? Or there's going to be a consolidation of like one place where all the
Yeah.
dispatchers are?
I think to really get the benefits of doing this, we
Yeah.
really do need to get the people all in the same place.
Yeah.
So that,
Okay.
when a person gets overwhelmed on the call, they can tap the person next to them, hey, I need your help right here. So we are looking at how best to co-locate
Okay.
all the staff.
Yeah. And so is there, but what about the PSAP? How many of there's Burlington is? No, Burlington doesn't. So it's
Shelburne's the
Shelburne
only PSAP in
and
Chittenden County.
Williston State Police.
The state police, yeah.
So will everybody else, they'll just, how will that work?
So I think the real thought is to take the PSAP that Shelburne has and go to the state 911 board and grow that PSAP to cover the rest of the
Okay.
county. So there'd be one PSAP, and it's really about the one stage
Yes.
answering
Yes.
for the whole county, as opposed to right now you have one stage, but most of the county has a two-stage.
Yep.
So we want to have one stage for the whole county. And the 911 board is well aware of our conversations, and I think have been pretty encouraging, so.
PSAP is Public Safety Answering Point for those who
Thank
maybe
you.
don't have their acronym.
It's the
Definition list
It's
handy.
911.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
So you said everyone is still in, Essex is still in? I know they were talking about whether or not to send a rep at one point, and tonight might be the night. And how would that affect, if you lose Vermont's second most populous municipality, how does that affect this effort?
Was there anything new that came up last week? No. Okay, yeah, so, sorry, I was not here. But Essex has not,
They're attending the meetings.
yeah,
haven't
they are
sent an
part,
official rep yet.
they're, I would call it monitoring, so they're in the room, but they have not officially appointed a member to the Joint Survey Committee. So, in terms of how that affects the cost, I mean, obviously, we don't know yet, but they're participating in the entirety of the process, regardless of they haven't officially made that appointment.
I was just going to say on that, in terms of, for this to really work, what the consultant showed is that for the economics to work, strictly from a call volume, Burlington is fundamental to this.
Yep.
And then the Shelburne with the PSAP part, so you can consolidate and have the one-stop shopping. Really, Burlington and Shelburne are the two most fundamental municipalities to make this work. And of course, it's going to be great if others come along for the ride. Yeah.
So if other towns that have dispatch now choose to not participate, it would just be, the cost would be shared by whatever the towns are that are participating.
If 5
Yeah.
out of 7 do it, then the costs will share everyone's 5, but also that means the other 2 have to still have their own staff.
Right, right. And who would they, but if they don't have PSAP, they,
The same model they have now.
okay, so they would go to Williston. I mean, to the state police. State police, yeah, okay.
I mean, I think by and large, there's quite a bit of support from legislative bodies across the county. So I think our anticipation is certainly it'd be too early to predict that all municipalities will join, but I think it appears like a lot of them, Colchester, Shelburne, Burlington, South Burlington, a lot of them are really behind this. So I would expect that a number of them will join.
Can I just ask a follow-up? Why will Essex only date but not marry? Sorry? Why will Essex only date but not marry in this process? Why are they only, why won't they join?
Because I think they had some experience with trying to put together a union municipal district for their parks, and that was shot down most recently.
Yeah.
Right.
So couple of questions. One is, on this union, representation, so Hinesburg would not have a representative
As it's written now.
as it's written now?
So, when that question has come up at other select boards, and Richmond asked that question, and a couple others, has, it seems like, you know, you want to have more representation and control over it. I think the way it's written right now, there's going to be kind of like, if you want to be an owner, there are also costs that are going to come with that in terms of sharing the upfront capital costs and things like that. So right now, I think it's being drafted as only those that have already taken on those costs are in it, but I don't know that the group would be opposed to other towns wanting to participate in sharing those costs. They would probably be open to that, but we don't know what those are yet, so.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, if you're, I had one other question before then I'll.
Sure.
And so who's paying for the study now? Because now you got consultants and, you know,
So-
there's a lot of
so there's-
information to gather.
there was $35,000, so the 7 towns, I'm sorry, yeah, the consultant cost $35,000. So those 7 towns put in $5,000 each to pay for that.
Okay.
And that was it. That contract is done as of January 31st. Right now, all of this work is being done by municipal staff and with a
Okay.
little RPC facilitation assistance.
Yeah. And so there would be a board, if they all vote in, of
Yep.
7 members, representatives from those towns, and then a subcommittee of police chiefs and the sort of users
Yep.
into that
And I think-
organization.
And I think we're also talking about having a board member represent the contracting towns. Is that true at the last meeting? So there would be some representation, but not every contracting town. Because there's a lot more of those. I mean, I think.
Yeah, how many contracting?
Milton, Colchester provides dispatch services for Milton. Milton opted to be part of this joint survey committee. They
Okay.
wanted to have a say in how this is formed.
But does that give them representation in the union?
Yes.
So it was $5,000 to get in?
No.
Oh.
We don't know what it
Okay.
costs.
All
We don't know
right.
what
Yeah,
it's going
yeah.
to cost to set
They
it up.
paid $5,000 to be part of the study
Okay.
committee.
Okay, that makes sense.
Good try,
Okay.
though. I like what you're thinking.
How much did Milton pay Colchester a year for the service? It's hundreds,
Yeah.
it's $300,000 or $400,000.
What?
Yeah, so just for you to have a sense of scale, I think, I'm talking off the top of my head here, you guys get 50?
No.
Less, yeah.
We pay some money.
It's less than 50,000 total.
We pay an amount less than what Milton pays Colchester, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the other towns, and that was because Milton had their own staff, the other towns were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for their own staff for these services. You know, some were in 7 figures, you know, I think Burlington and, you know, I don't know if South Burlington.
That's the enthusiastic support for this idea.
What's that?
That's why they're
Right.
enthusiastically supporting. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
In total, I think, you know, this is my ballpark. I'm guessing that this whole operation is going to be, it's a $3 to $4 million operation when you have 40 employees approximately, right? Like it's going to be a good size operation. And that's why I was kind of saying, like, you know, getting in and being an owner is a whole different level of commitment than being a contracting town. Mostly, we're talking about money.
But in theory, it's a service that we're all going to benefit from. And why wouldn't we all, you know, I mean, there's only going to be, well, there'll be two dispatch, there'll be one office, right?
Primarily, yeah.
That is staffed by the current staff that there is, in some different configuration.
Yep.
And they are going to be an entity in the same way that the school district is an entity. And those are going to be employees that are hired by this separate entity. They're not going to be Shelburne employees anymore, right?
Right.
So if we all pay into it, then, but we figure out the costs on a per capita basis, or a call volume basis? I mean, I guess that's what we're working on.
Yes.
So it seems to me that,
I don't want you to get away that, from what I'm saying, that it's an absolute no.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, like, there's, from my point of view, so this, I'm speaking for myself now, so I don't get these guys in trouble, but the contracting towns are kind of paying operating costs. Like, you're paying for that service per call, or whatever it is. I'll call them the owner towns, are also paying the capital cost of all of the workstations, the space,
Right.
over however many years. I mean, you know, they might be floating a bond to get this started, and that isn't really shared necessarily with those contracting towns.
We can't tell, we can't.
Except for Bill.
Yeah, we can't tell that it's not being shared, we just know this is what we're being charged.
yeah, because we have no sense of how those budgets are developed. And
So you will this fall.
We have had that conversation at a staff level about how that number is seeking clarity prior to the budget process, so.
but what are the capital costs? What goes into the
Computer,
computers?
Consoles,
Okay.
desk space,
Yep.
software, there's a logging system that you have to have, all sorts of technical
Yeah.
equipment.
So what happens to all the old equipment?
A lot of it will get repurposed
Okay.
as much as we can. You gotta make the radios compatible, obviously.
Yeah, there's
Joe,
a
you
lot
know
of
about
different technology, little differentiations.
Across the board, yeah.
so many towns too, so that's, I think, the challenge is getting it consistent.
So Al, I don't know if, did you want to add anything to this to?
No, I've been quite heavily involved for many years, and again with this and setting on the technical committee. And I mean, all the question you've probably asked, we've thought about. I mean, you know, I think our capital probably startup cost is going to be around 3 million, and probably about a 3 million operating budget, just from past experience. So, you know, I think once we get the numbers, it would make most sense in my mind for all of the communities to be members, you know, because that's the greatest volume of people and greatest good. You'll get the most input that way, and you might feel, some communities may feel that their voice won't be heard if they aren't. You might say a charter member of the whole thing. So I think that's yet to be worked out. You know, in my mind, it's best if everybody's a member. You know, all the communities. It gives you you might say, double buy-in on it. So, but like I say, it's a work in progress, and we've gotten here before, and I'm waiting for the price.
It's never gotten this far before, but they've been
Yeah, it
working
has.
on it since 1964.
Yeah, actually, we got to signing a contract at Burlington PD, and the union stopped it. So it's got close. So we're there. Hopefully we get the next step.
Good. Are there any more questions? Or any further clarification?
If I could just do a summary. In Colchester, we're having a really tough time retraining and attracting dispatchers. It's a tough job, it really is, and I just have the highest regard for those folks. The bottom line is, what we're trying to do is, we want to make it safer for the dispatchers, we want to make it safer for the emergency responders, we want a quicker response time. We think we can bend the cost curve and make this more affordable and sustainable long-term. So that's our goal, better service at a better cost.
Okay. Good, well, thank you very much, yeah, good luck.
thank you for your time. Thanks a
What
lot.
What would be our next step as a board here? Do we wait to hear
We're
the,
really trying to get all the information and data pulled together to come back and give you an update in the fall. And as Al alluded, you know, that may be a time where there's some possibility of, you know, what does the agreement look like, and how do you want to participate or not?
And obviously, you're going to want to, I'll do my best to communicate too, but keep your pulse on what Shelburne does, because if Shelburne joins, I'm pretty sure Hinesburg is going to have to
Yeah.
join as
Okay.
well.
All right.
So, you know, as Shelburne goes, so will Hinesburg. So we'll stay in communication about that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
thank you. Next item on the agenda, number 5, is consider authorizing bond anticipation note for the highway garage. I'll hand it over to you, Trevor.
Yep. Last meeting, we gave you a quote from the National Bank of Middlebury. They've got a local branch. The rates are fairly low. We had talked about maybe, if you want to, there's still the opportunity to shop around for a better rate. This is born of, we need some startup costs to keep this moving until bond proceeds would be available at the end of July. So we'd be looking for action on this one if you're comfortable with it. An alternate would be to go a little slower and seek use of some of that unassigned fund balance for some of the initial costs and wait a little bit longer, but this would let us proceed with quite a few of the elements. Like I said, to be repaid with the proceeds from the bond. And so this would be repaid, this loan term essentially would be when we get the bond proceeds, so it's from approval to first week of August at the latest.
The bond group meets in July.
Yep, we will, if you do item number 6, we will then apply. May 15th is the deadline. Their board meets, I think, in June, they said. We'll know sometime after that. They'll go out to the bond market in July. We'll be able to essentially close on that bond by the end of July and have those proceeds available, day after kind of a thing.
Are we going to borrow all the money at once or just take out what we need to pay the bills?
For this piece?
Yeah,
Yeah, this is just a not to exceed
Okay.
500,000 of the
Yeah.
3.1 total.
okay. I'll make a motion to authorize the town administrator to seek a bond anticipation note for an amount of not to exceed 500,000 from the National Bank of Middlebury, with said note to be repaid through the general obligation bond obtained through the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank.
I'll second that.
Okay, any more discussion? I have a question. This is the second time now we've gone to the Bank of Middlebury, right?
We did it for the solar
Yeah.
truck. Yeah, we asked the
Okay.
one question, so we're trying to use it local, and with some of the uncertainty at merchants, maybe we try.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Motion's passed. Item number 6. This is the actual actions associated with getting the bond.
Yep, there are 2 resolutions that are required as part of the bond process. If you'll think back to both the solar tracker bond in the fall and the highway garage this winter, there was the resolution of necessity where we essentially say we have to borrow this amount in order to do this. One of the other ones we have to do is this resolution of reimbursement that we essentially accept the obligation to, it allows us to be reimbursed for those expenses that we do borrow. It's a technical piece of the process. And we checked with Paul Giuliani, who is we've used as bond counsel in the past, and most recently for the Wayner Wells, and sought his counsel prior to the different bond votes, and he responded that both resolutions are fine as written, which makes sense since they're based. He wrote the solar tracker one minus one whereas at the very top where we updated for the difference in time, and then the highway garage is modeled after that. So this will allow us to complete the bond application process, part of the application, and then allow us to be reimbursed for any money we spent from those bond proceeds. I think that might be the better way to summarize it. And it's a pain in the behind, but if you could please someone, whoever the lucky or unlucky
Oh, yeah.
maker of the motions,
You have to read that whole thing.
it would be nice. If you don't want to, it'll probably be okay. That's my old training, but it's nice to have it appear in the minutes to fully prove that you did it.
Just change the date.
In which one?
Both of them. It says May 1st, 2016.
Oh, yep, so with that change. I have no idea what month or year it is anymore. So, May 16 to 17.
Any more questions? We would entertain a motion. Aaron, you're experienced with.
Yeah,
just like
I've
news reading.
I've read
microphone?
before. I know how to read. So you're suggesting, Trevor, we actually have to read the entire document into the motion? All section, all the way 1 through 8?
You could amend your motion to include requesting that the recording secretary include
paste.
the resolutions in their entirety as part of the motion in lieu of reading them.
So if
suppose.
the board is comfortable with that, of which I am,
And
I
we'll
will do
provide a
that.
Word version to Val, so it's a,
Yeah.
So I think if you make the motion.
Yep.
With that said, you wouldn't need to make a.
Because it's
Yeah.
in the minutes is where we really want this to appear, is the intent of what I'm hearing you say, Trevor, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me go back to. So I move that the select board approve the resolution of reimbursement as proposed for the bond related to the purchase of the solar trackers, and hereby read said resolution into the record of this meeting, referencing, let me go to that page, the declaration of official intent of the town of Hinesburg to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of indebtedness for the solar trackers, of which the clerk of the board will be provided the language to include into the minutes.
Second?
Does
With
that
the
work?
friendly amendment, just to revise for that date at the bottom.
Oh,
Yeah.
with the friendly amendment, yes. So noted, the date at the bottom of said resolution should read May 1st, 2017.
Second.
Thanks.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as read and can say aye?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, the motion's passed. I would entertain
Yep. Let me get back to,
that was for the solar trackers?
yep, that was for the solar trackers. I got it right here. Motion number 2, I move that the select board approves resolution of reimbursement as proposed for the bond related to the highway garage project, as hereby read said resolution into the record of this meeting, as noted in the resolution in our notes here, which I will have for you, which is garage. The resolution titled Declaration of Official Intent of the Town of Hinesburg to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of indebtedness for the town garage, which the clerk will log into the notes in its entirety, all 8 sections, with the date amended to May 1st, 2017.
Second. Any discussion? I'll just mention, because we didn't read the entire declaration, that the first one, the solar trackers, is a bond for $312,000. And then this one, the highway garage project, is $3.1 million.
Both are currently available online as items number 6A and 6B in the public meeting packet online.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion's passed.
Thank you.
Ouch.
Don't say I never give you guys anything exciting to read. This packet's full of it.
The next item is item 7, considering the local emergency operation plan. It's an annual review of the plan. Al, perhaps you could tell us why we do this each year and any changes this year with the submitted plan.
Yeah, really just updating, put Marilee's name into it, and they do it annually. This year it is actually finally a grant requirement, so any grants that, public safety grants, and a lot of other highway grants, some of them are involved in it, so. It's basically an operational document, so should and when and should we have an emergency, It's actually a tracking device also. If you notice the way it's printed down below, there's actually time slots that you can put in and notification times. And
Yeah.
So it's a working
document
Right,
during
it's a
an
working
event.
document, so, yep. And there are some annexes which exist which aren't public as to responses to the schools and other places, so. But just an annual, have to sign it annually. Because they want to make sure that new select board members and everything are on duly noted.
Al, is this a document that needs to be available online for the public, or is this more of a working document for
It's more of a
staff
working
and us?
document for us.
Okay.
And it's how, they keep a copy. We have copies here at the town clerk's office. I think Trevor's office
Sure.
has them, Renee's has them.
Yep.
Frank has one, we have one.
Yep.
And emergency management keeps one. And it's really our document. And a lot of it's not for public viewing.
Got it.
So some of it's because of the phone numbers, obviously. Some people don't want their phone numbers out there, so that's one of the reasons it's kept kind of close to the vest, I guess you could say, so.
Very good. What are some scenarios that we have used this document for in the past? Sounds like grants
Flooding,
are
yeah.
one.
Yep, anytime flooding is a pretty good sized one, that's probably the most common when we use it. Storms of sorts, whether it's snow or whatever. You know, anytime we have a large event, which this also can be used for, if we had a concert, a lot of the numbers would be good for people that are in charge of it. I mean, obviously being a small town, we all know each other. So, you know, it's pretty easy to communicate. So I think that probably the biggest thing where this document comes into play is regional planning also has a copy of it because they are contracted by emergency management so that when there is an event, hard rainstorm, whatever, they will go down the list and call people to see if there is any damage.
Yep.
So that's really probably the most frequent that this gets used is really for that purpose, just
Got it.
tracking people down, see if there's damage.
And once it's submitted, is it a working document? I mean, can you make changes during the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly just updating really the phone numbers, but yes, there are annexes involved in it that do get looked at quite frequently. And there's a list of daycares and we add, subtract, and there's a number of other documents that aren't included here. And again, that's for one of those things, if we, had a super major disaster where most of the people were impaired here, other towns could use that document through emergency management if they had to come in and take over operation
Yeah.
for us. So that's probably the biggest potential use, because we kind of all know each other. So, and it does. I was on, 2 or 3 committees, working groups that drafted this and made a lot of changes to it over the years. So it actually is the document we have today. So it is a real, true working document. So.
Any other questions?
Will you get points of contact for some of these?
Some of those already exist, just not in this document. Because they
and
didn't want.
Hillview Mountain
Yep.
Mobile Home Park?
Yep, Frank actually has that one, yeah. Yeah,
Is that, where is Hillview Mobile Home Park?
Hillview, Triple L.
That's the name,
Yeah.
of Hillview?
Well, it used to be Triple L, it's Hillview.
Oh, it's changed
So,
its name, okay.
Yeah.
And Phil, are you okay with putting your,
Yeah, I noticed
Okay.
my phone number wasn't there. I could certainly give you that.
okay.
I'm happy with that. And we've had training before. I'm not sure, is that an annual training? No.
No, you did it once, so
Okay.
We're good for a while.
Incident command, I give you, it's all yours.
I mean, anytime you would like another 402, I could
Okay.
arrange it for you anytime you would like to have it, so. One thing
June or July would be good.
Yeah. One thing I would like to do while I've got the floor, I guess, is I would like to have the town, I will make arrangements with Renee or whoever to have the people from Vermont Alert come in to give you their presentation, and we can adopt Vermont Alert. And what that would allow us to do is, I use it already because they know me. Like when we had the horse get loose on North Road, there was a phone call that went out to all the in the area. So what VT Alert does, and everybody can go online and sign up. If you go to the Vermont Emergency Management website, any of the state websites have the link to it, sign up to it. And what it will do, it gives you the ability to select your notification. But what happens also is when the town adopts this as their notification system, like when the town water system needs to put a boil water in or needs to put out some sort of notice, there are certain people that have the inputs into the system, and they can actually send that message to, say, every water user. I mean, it's all of what you want to set up. So if they needed, they can do it by geofencing, which is, area fencing, which is what I've used it for before, is geofencing a specific area to get a message out. So if we needed to send some special message to the entire town, they can geofence the entire town, and anybody, one that has signed up for it, so it goes to your cell phones, or they will hit every landline phone. They will hit a lot of the cell phones because they're able to, depending upon the tower, also select the phone. So, soon here I'll try to get it in the works to get that done by the board, because it's a very usable tool, especially for other departments. If Mike was going to close down a certain road,
Yeah, a bridge got closed for
any
whatever.
number of reasons, we can use it. So just another tool for us. So.
Well, I would hope people can opt into it.
Oh yeah.
And
Well,
if you choose to
Right.
maintain your privacy, you can.
Right. Well, only if when it goes out in the geofenced area, it will hit every phone that's there, whether you're part of the system or not. You can opt in to get notifications for bad weather and all that stuff, but yes and no, I guess maybe. Yeah.
Any other questions? So, would entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the emergency management operations plan.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? The motion's passed. Thank you, Al. Item number 8, it's the financing, discussion of the financing option for the SCBA's equipment. So you're back on, I think. So we were putting some capital money aside.
Yes, yeah.
For the SCBA's self-contained breathing apparatus used by the fire department.
Yep.
And now I think we're in a race against when they become obsolete.
Right. Yep. Basically, they have a time stamp on them, and
this is the tank themselves.
the whole the tanks and the breathing apparatus themselves are carbon fiber, so they have a limited lifetime. These are 2008. They were replaced. We got them originally in 2004 or 5 with a grant, FEMA grant, and then 2008 they were all contaminated at the fire, so they were all replaced under insurance in 2008. They have a they had a 10-year life, they had a 5-year life to span to start out with. And then they gave them another 5, and now they're maybe another 5. So we're at a year away of maybe yes, maybe no on the tanks.
Do they test them?
Yes, they
to
get
extend the
hydrostatic
life?
tested, yeah, hydrostatic tested. It's just under 28,000 if we replace just the tanks, but that's not replacing the actual mechanisms themselves. Because of the technology, Dave Esty and I, we've been testing a bunch of other ones, and I think it's basically, obviously, from 10 years ago, the technology's come a long ways. We've started running into some breakdowns with those units. It's $700 every time we have to replace the circuit board in them. And we have 14 units, and we've replaced our first one now. And the guy says, well, you're in the window now where you're gonna start having these issues come up. The new SCBA's, the ones we're looking at, there are about 5 manufacturers, but the main ones are Scott and MSA. Dave and I went to Underhill and talked to the salesman, and they've given us a quote. The Scotts, which what we have today, have certain parts are warranted for 5 years, certain parts for 7 years, and certain parts for 10 years. The MSA units, which are the ones we prefer to purchase, have a flat warranty of 15 years. Everything's covered. One of the other problems we have currently with our units is they use AA batteries to power the units. And if we go out and use the air packs for a training, we have to replace all 6 batteries and all 14 air packs. And they only will warranty the operation if you're using Duracell batteries. So obviously, if you buy that many batteries every time we go out, we're spending quite a lot of money. And that's indicative of that board failure coming, is using more and more current. The new ones have a self-contained battery pack. That one's 15-year warranty. So it's, the technology's come a long ways, really. So, we've looked at them real close, got price quotes, and surprisingly, they're within a couple $1,000s of each other. But the warranty is what? And the other drawback on the Scott right now is they do not have anyone in Vermont that services. So like right now, if I have a pack go bad, the guy comes up from Syracuse. He comes up almost weekly because there are a lot of air packs that were sold in this same time frame, and he's up here a lot repairing. So if we happen not to hit one of the weeks, then we have to ship them over to a guy in Plattsburgh, and then he ships them down. So it's beginning to become kind of labor intensive with these air packs. And seeing the end of life coming, there is some value in them right now because they're still within their life window. I got a price today of $6,500, and we probably can get a little bit more than that for them. But I think I think we'd be fortunate to do that. I did talk to, the only one I really had talked to at this point is the Northfield Savings. I also was going to talk to Middlebury and Merchants, but I haven't got that far yet because we were just trying to get an idea of what kind of financing was out there. And this is another lease instead of a out-and-out purchase. So we did see the shortfall, I think, in the budgeting last year. So we went from the 5,000, I think, to the 15,000.
15, right?
Because we saw the shortfall coming in that, knowing the lifespan was what it was. So, I think we're close, I guess, is best I can say. So, and one of the other things, which another real plus to the MSAs is we use we have infrared cameras that we use, and both manufacturers have infrared cameras now that attach. The MSA is actually part of the harness. They're $5,000 a piece. They're going to include 3 of those cameras in this price for us, and Scott would not include any in their price, so we're getting a really good value for the money we're looking at having to spend, so.
Comments?
I'm just wondering why we didn't have this information when we were doing the budget, and we weren't anticipating borrowing this money during budget time, were we?
We were anticipating a more iterative approach. I think it was born out of talking with other departments. Could
Yep.
we lease finance it like we finance other bigger capital purchases? Developing the option. I think it was more of that than
Yeah.
anything
But-
else in terms of a development process. It
Right.
just this reflects where we are in this cycle.
Right.
Right,
We
so
were-
we didn't know we were going to be here when we were doing the budget.
We were thinking of a more traditional, let's put money aside for replacement, but at the same time talking about how we're likely to be short on full replacement value within the time frame we needed. But $15,000 was more than we'd been putting aside and was a bigger step in that direction. And then developing the idea as the months have gone by, so that we can have this discussion tonight about an alternative way to purchase all of them all at one time. That mirrors some other lease-to-own models we've used for other equipment.
And then we'll be replacing them always,
15 years from now, yeah.
but all of them at the same time, as
Yeah.
opposed to staggering it?
The recommendation would be to try to figure out from after year 5, so this, if you, say we went all the way with this, we used the funds, we'll have $40,000 available as of July 1, not counting trade-in value and all that. You know, we can budget for those payments in the capital budget, and then much like we've started to do with other equipment, hold those payments steady for a period of time so we can get into an outright purchase and replace schedule, and we save the interest cost and
Yeah.
and are budgeting, you know, a little more on point for the things we need to and want to replace.
And we originally got these through a grant.
Yeah, we got a grant to replace the original ones we'd purchased, yeah. So we've only got one grant, I guess is the way to put it. We replaced them in, I think, 2005 with a grant, because the other ones ran into the same fate. They finally basically banned the use of them, so.
So does every firefighter have one of these when they
No.
go into a building?
No, if they're going inside a building, yes, and if they're in smoke conditions like car fires, yes, they have to wear them. If you're outside a building and you're in the smoke, yes, you have to wear them.
How many firefighters are trained to use these?
We have about 22 right now that are trained, and we're actually going to go down to 13 units, because that's all we have the capacity to carry with the trucks we have. So, rather than, we had originally 14, and when we did the shifting of the trucks and combining, we lost one position, but that's fine.
How often do they get used?
Every time we get a call.
Well, but
Yep. Every time truck goes out, if it's a CO call, they wear them. Yep. I mean, about the only time they don't wear them is if it's a car accident without any signs of fire or smoke. That's about the only time they don't wear them, so. Yep. Standard procedures come off the truck with the air pack on, because you don't want to have to go back and get it if you need it, so.
So there's none of these units that are in better shape than others?
Not really. We've kind of moved them around through the truck, so they've kind of got equal wear and tear on them. And, you know, they come up and they do annual inspections on them, so if there's worn harnesses, they replace them. And it's probably, I don't know, it's about $1,600 for the annual inspection, not counting any parts that they use. So,
And the manufacturer does the inspection for you?
yeah, well, the service rep out of New York comes up and does it, yeah.
So this is a 15-year warranty, so the tanks, will they need to be hydrostatically
Oh, yeah,
tested?
they still have to be hydro tested, but.
And do
yep.
they pay for that, or do we pay for that?
No, we end up paying for that.
And
yeah,
the
yeah.
inspection we would
As we
pay
do-
for?
Yeah, as we do now. They actually, a lot of the inspections they're gonna cover because, one, it's done locally out of Barry, but it's all part of the warranty issue.
Okay.
So,
And
that's
is
the,
it-
right, the only thing we might have to be billed for is the fit testing,
Yep.
but we don't do that to everybody every year, so.
I got a question for Trevor, I think, then. For this amount of money with the increase in the fund balance that we were seeing, does it make sense to pay for that from the fund balance and then replace that money over the next 5 years rather than pay almost 3% interest to a bank?
It's an interesting question. You would save the interest cost, but it does cut into that fund balance. We'd still be north of that 250,000 rainy day amount. I think there's an extra 125, 130, if I'm remembering the audit right, this year.
Something Michael had
Yeah.
suggested, using our own money to, pay for these things directly and just pay ourselves back.
Yeah,
Probably pay ourselves back.
I guess you'd set more aside in capital.
Well, if it's 100,000, 15 years, it's 15,000 a year, of, which we did this year. Put the 15, so you'd say that's the cost of, replacements going forward.
the challenge might be more in the mechanism, just by the nature of what the unassigned fund balance is. We don't have a line for it in the budget, so we'd have to figure out whatever mechanism it would be for repayment. If you wanted to repay that particular source of funds, other options would be repaying, wouldn't have come out of the capital. So, I mean, there'd have to be some conversation about how you want to, what does repayment look like in that scenario?
Right. Just doesn't seem like a massive amount of money, but, the interest is going to add up over the 5 years.
Well, did we have an amortization
Yep,
schedule? We
you
did.
do. Yep, 8A.
Yeah, it's $5,500 interest, almost $5,600 over 5 years, so.
And that's at the not to exceed 75,000. That number could be lower depending on other factors, but this is sort of the more conservative snapshot.
If we didn't move forward with this, what's your option B?
Don't really have much of, I mean, we have a year. At that time, we're gonna lose the value of what we've got, and then we're still gonna need the air pack, so.
Why do you, who would buy them?
They're shipped out of country. They aren't used in the United States, they don't worry about dates, so. It's too bad we have to, but.
Well, what would it take to pursue this conversation that Tom brings up?
Can develop some options for what that would look like as well if you want before, you don't have to.
Is that realistic to pursue that, or is that kind of spinning our wheels and we're gonna end up right in the same spot?
I'd want to think about that
Okay.
some more. You may end up that this is still the best of the options in terms of replacing them all at once at this time.
And, I mean, we still have time in the budget, too. So.
Yeah. Oh, in terms of if there's anything left on the
Right.
lot. Yeah, no, that's an interesting
So
other.
something could come up,
Right,
and,
yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, I think it's a reasonable question to ask.
I think I wouldn't want to move ahead until we actually looked at the audit and understood the fund balance and in the context of everything else. I mean, I think it's worth thinking about, but I think, looking at that audit and making sure we all understand what the audit is, what the unassigned fund balance is, and how we're doing that. It's something that we haven't done before. I think if we were to do that, we would want, to have a full discussion of how that money comes about.
So what's your timing on this, Al?
Well, I mean, we have 30-day quotes. I mean,
Say that again?
we have 30-day quotes
Okay, yeah.
for the prices, so, you know, will it change after? We probably won't get the extra infrared cameras, but that's fine.
What's the desire here? Do we want to,
I assume you've already decided, though, who you're gonna,
Yeah, the vendor,
Yeah.
the brand, yes, yeah.
so, I mean, it sounds like, you know, this kind of came up quick, I guess. It's a lot of money. Even if we waited till our next meeting to put it back up there, we'd have a better understanding. You've now explained it to us. We might have more questions, I suppose. This will give people in the town to ask us questions or to come to the next meeting if they have an opinion one way or the other. And, you know, I think you've got a question about the fund balance, or, you know, are there any other options, I
What are the
think?
other options,
And
yeah.
there might be or there might not be, but we'll have asked the question. Does that sound reasonable?
Does.
2 weeks isn't a big deal, is it?
No,
No.
All right, good. Thanks for the information.
thank you.
All right. Is that good? Any other comments on that? Item 8. Item 9. Alex and his regular discussion of the town plan, proposed town plan, Chapter 5 and 6. I went into this thinking that it's a simple chapters, but there was a lot of information in there.
Right, so Chapter 5 is the Natural Resources chapter, has a slightly longer title than that, but that's how I think of it. And Hinesburg has been very concerned about its natural resources in our municipal planning for a very long time. So this chapter has always been a bulky one. There's a lot to talk about. There are a lot of resources to discuss and talk about possible action items for. So yeah, Chapter 5 is pretty meaty, and then Chapter 6 is the community facilities chapter, and that's really your bread and butter, as it talks about all the various municipal services. And there are a couple of sticky points in there that we probably should discuss, and a couple items that need to be updated based on the wastewater study. So Phil, did you want to start with Chapter 5? And
I think so. So there's 5, 6, and then we can refer to, is it page 7? Which is the
right, page 7
primary-
would be the top priority action
top
items.
priority actions. And just a reminder that this is maybe our 3rd time where we are reviewing a couple chapters at a time. Do we have 2 more sessions after this?
You have one more to cover chapters 7 and 8, and then you will have gone through the entire document with the exception of the maps and the appendices. And then my hope was that I could wrangle you for a special meeting.
Recap.
An extra one in May, or maybe, I guess it has to be in May, so that I could present you with all the changes you've requested. You could just do the once-over one more time, and then then I would have clearance to finalize the document for a June 22nd public hearing.
And that's on the schedule now, the 22nd, the public
The
hearing?
June one, I think, yeah, fits that schedule that was laid out.
That's your new calendar for June, right? Is
Yeah, that's our second of when we moved to the Thursdays in June, and then
Yeah.
it matches back to roughly the timeline we laid out when you adopted the review schedule. March, maybe February, somewhere around that time frame.
Yep.
Okay, so we've been sort of, I guess, opening it up for questions, particularly from the board, and we'll start with Chapter 5.
as you can see, it's organized into sort of topical areas. So the action items are listed at the front, and then it goes into discussion of each of those topical areas.
Looking at action item 5.1.2 of work with state and regional partners and road crews to create a plan for dealing with invasive species. And I was glad to see that. I feel like it's a really important thing, especially for our forest resources, and wondered if we might want to add to that. I didn't look in the back to see who was responsible for that, actually. But I think it's an important thing for the town forest to consider, town forest committee, the conservation commission, and the trails committee, and that there's a lot of education that we can do for private landowners, forest landowners, ag landowners to assure the vitality and viability of our forests and the regeneration of our forests. So I was glad to see that there, and by talking about the road crew, I felt like we were focusing it kind of on poison parsnip, and I feel like the woody invasive species in our forests are probably even of more concern for protecting.
So did you have a recommended change?
Well, I wasn't sure why it was talking about the road crew, it's in the forest resource section, but it's talking about the road crew, so, okay.
We identified the road crew as a required partner. I don't think we are, making that more important than what's going on in forestry, but road crews have been, road buffer, management practices have been responsible for the spread of a lot of invasive species. And it's not just poison parsnip. I mean, it's knotweed. It's Phragmites, knotweed, and others. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, what's, barberry in the woods is crazy in Hinesburg. Yeah.
So responsibility is Conservation Commission and Select Board on
Right, I mean, I think
this.
I was talking with Pat Maynard from the Town Forest Committee, and, she was feeling like there's a lot of education that we could do for private landowners. There's programs through NRCS that can help people with management of this, so I'm glad to see it on there. I just don't know if we need to add anything to it. But.
So Andrea, I think it's important to understand what that action item wants to do, and that is to create a plan.
Yep.
So I think that would be in the plan.
Okay.
If those are important ways to achieve a goal of dealing with invasives, that would be part of the plan.
Okay, good.
In that same spot, I noticed on 513 is the discussion of a mechanism to contribute to town land acquisition fund supporting conservation. And it mentions, a percentage of taxes, and each year, while it pretty much gets support, there's been, 1 year really large amount, and then sometimes a little less, and it's almost at the, how the select board is doing that year, and looking at it as a percentage. It'd be a fairly small percentage, but as a percentage might not be a bad approach. Then it's very predictable and, can give some, I guess, reassurance that there's support there, assuming it gets voted at town meeting, and that, the funds would be something we don't have to, depending on how we're feeling in a particular year.
And hopefully the funds would be there when you, or
Something
a good
comes
chunk
up.
of the funds would be
Right.
there when you needed them, rather than having to have a special question for a large sum.
Yeah.
This action item doesn't require that. It's just using that as a for instance.
Right,
So whatever the select board or other groups want to come up with as an actual plan the idea is to have it be a more consistent contribution and not an up and down sort of thing. Other towns do
Other
do it
towns
as a
do it.
percentage.
Yes.
They do it as
a
a
penny on the
percentage.
tax rate or what
Right.
have
Yeah,
you.
Yep.
I think Charlotte does that,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And they
Be-
do it for a period of time, and then they re-vote on it. Like, they'll do it
Yeah.
for 10 years, and then they'll re-vote that they want to do that. So certainly,
So Phil, did you have a suggestion to
No, I
revise
think
or
it's
just like
something,
that?
yeah, we should consider.
Okay.
So we get that consistency and it just feels like it'd be a better way to do it.
I wanted, can I
Yeah.
say something? On page 47, where it says continued management of these forest resources and traditional uses, I wanted to add hunting in there.
In the parenthetical statement of examples in that sentence?
Yes, yes. I mean, oftentimes we lump hunting in with recreation, but I feel like it's a really important activity that needs.
So this is the bottom of page 47, second column, the sentence that begins the paragraph, continued management of these forest resources and traditional uses, parentheses, gives a bunch of examples of what the traditional uses are. It doesn't include hunting. Certainly that's a traditional use,
Yeah.
so I think it's a good add.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's really important that we recognize that, because I think from a forest management standpoint, hunting is important. I know that on a lot of land that I've been on recently, there's a tremendous amount of deer browsing on oaks, and so there's just not regeneration of that species.
That's easy to add.
Yeah, okay.
Sure, yeah. You gotta use the mic, though.
On page 46, these goals and action items, it's a small point, but I think it might be helpful. I was asking Alex about this earlier today, this town's land acquisition fund. If we could name that something else, or if it should be named something else, town land preservation fund, or, because I think often what we want to do is collect an easement on property, not acquire the property. It's more cost effective and can accomplish a lot of the same goals. And I would hate for us to be painted into a box because, it
To
says.
land acquisition versus
Yeah.
conservation, yeah.
Right, because I think the original, the motions that it usually has shown up in as the article in there, it does, when we do vote on it, it says for the purpose of easements and/or land and fee. So I think the intent of when we originally started this fund, it included easements, and I would agree with Lenore that we should have a fund, a better name for it.
Yes, just so it's not misunderstood.
Yeah.
And along those same lines, so we have that action item 5.1.3, to use the land acquisition fund to protect forest resources, then we don't say that under agriculture, under goal 5.2.
Which,
And
yeah.
then, which I think we should.
Yeah,
Or
which is
down
happening.
at the bottom, under 5.3.2, you get back to the land
Right.
acquisition fund. And I think maybe you could just say it once and include forest and ag and wetlands or whatever. I think you could say it just once instead of 2 or 3 times on the list of actions. But we want to make it inclusive and clear that it's not just acquisition. At least that would be my suggestion.
Well, sometimes that happens in a lot of these other goals where the goals and the actions is that it does get repeated, and I had the same thought, but it's.
Well, then we should repeat it consistently.
Yes,
Should appear under
absolutely. Yes.
agriculture then.
Yeah, yeah.
Just don't leave anything out.
Right, right. And I would suggest, Alex, maybe if you look at how we word it when we vote on it as an article,
It's worded this way, as far as I remember, but I'll double check.
okay, but there's more to it than just that when we're voting on it, I think.
I'll
Okay,
double check.
okay.
I thought this was how we last voted on it, but it's been several years since we contributed money to the fund, so.
Right.
Can we change the name here or change the name both places so it's
Well, we can just
inclusive?
clarify it, I think, to make sure that it includes the language that's in the article. That, because it does say, I mean, that was always the intention,
Yeah.
was easements.
As
'cause
long as we don't preclude our,
Right.
I really think it's semantics.
Yeah.
You can acquire an easement just as much as you can
Yes.
acquire a piece of land. So
Yes.
the word acquisition is not specific to fee ownership in my mind, but I'm happy to clarify it
Right.
if that makes everyone feel
Yes.
more comfortable.
Well, that would,
It is an important distinction, I think. Yes, Bill?
Yeah, just, I think Alex is right on that from a legal standpoint, but for other reasons, I also agree with Lenore that I think preservation is a better and more specific term to reflect the intent of the fund. So I concur with that part of the suggestion.
Any other comments from the
Yeah, I have a
board?
more broad comment on 511 and 521. There's some kind of proscribed words there. In 511, it says, when properties are subdivided, keep any new development away from interior forests. Fine idea, but I prefer to hear, like, encourage new development to stay away from interior forest. And development planning shall preserve town's valuable agricultural resources. 521. I'd replace shall with should.
I don't know, I feel pretty strongly about those words, that they're good words. I think, you know, we've adopted new subdivision regulations that I think support 5.1.1. And I think that our current subdivision regulations also support 5.2.1. So I'm comfortable with leaving them the way they are.
They do support that, but there may be certain instances where shall might just prohibit anything from happening when there may be other reasons why it might be acceptable. Whereas if you put...
These are guidelines, not laws.
Right, but it's used, it can be used through the Act 250 process and whatnot to determine the direction.
That's right.
So that's why I'm concerned about specific phrases.
I think that's why they were phrased that way, to
Yeah, I
give a
understand, and what I'm
direction.
saying is there may be certain instances where good agricultural land may be a perfectly good spot for something else. And if the word shall completely prohibits that, I don't think that's acceptable.
But I think you would be, the guiding documents that would be being used would be the subdivision regulations, and I think if we, you know, it's something that would be evaluated through the DRB, and then if it was an Act 250 hearing, it would be something that would be brought up then, and I feel like it's clearly been something that we've supported for a long time, and it's gotten codified in our regulations, and I think it's important. I mean, I'm sure that there's lawyers around who could pick it apart if it gets to Act 250, but at this point, I feel like I'd like the town to be taking a strong statement on these issues.
Well, I think it is. It's a strong statement just by having it in there. I'm talking about one word, which could impact a decision somewhere down the line. And I don't want every agricultural resource to be given such weight that it's going to overwhelm any other option for that property. And I think that one word could do that.
Alex, do you have any opinion on this as far as, oh, go ahead, sorry, Joe.
Thanks. So I think that Tom is right. Words are important, and these single words are very important words. Overall, I have to agree with Andrea. We've largely already codified this in our rural zoning, bylaws that speak to development, that speak to primary and secondary resources, how the Development Review Board is going to weigh an application based on those resources and citing.
I understand that, Joe, but if I'm a landowner and I'm paying a certain amount of taxes on property, and this one word is going to prevent me from doing something with my property that I may want to do.
Actually, these words aren't, what's in the zoning bylaws are going to dictate what the DRB does.
But this is a different level. I think Alex would agree with me that there are the town plan holds certain weight in certain parts of state government, which is why I'm concerned about the word shall.
I think the view of the Planning Commission, and I think what's gone on in the past defines this. And we've gone through rural zoning several times, in fact, and, it's been approved. And it is a working system to try and preserve ag and forest lands while still realizing development.
Any other comments from the board on this particular item?
I would like to say that it's come up again and again in town surveys how the townspeople want to preserve the rural character of Hinesburg. And that has to do with forests and open lands and farms. So I think that keeping these words is important. I think it's a real value for the people who live in this town.
But I don't want to overlook the rights of the landowners either, Mary Lee. I mean, yeah, we have the zoning regulations. That's great. But this is another level, and it does have a statutory.
Right, but it would only go to Act 250 after it had been through the DRB process, and it is a word that would get debated at the Act 250 level, and it's been interpreted in different ways at different times. And I think we should go on record with it being consistent currently with what our subdivision regulations are.
I believe the word should would do that.
Well,
Aaron, do you have any thoughts on this?
I understand what Tom's saying. I also understand the idea that that this holds some weight. The town, I mean, we wouldn't do this otherwise. It's the point of the town plan. I'm thinking about the process. I know we have zoning regs that talk to this very specific thing. Is this correct, Alex? That if this does come up as a conversation point, the zoning regs come into play. If they're questioned around something like this, the town plan is sort of the tiebreaker in terms of the argument. Is that thought of it? Am I thinking about this in the right way? How am I considering whether or not shall or should matters
So
in the context of process?
The regulations are clear enough to speak for themselves from a local development review standpoint. There wouldn't need to be a reference back to the town plan with these particular resources because the regulations are clear on that front. If a project was being reviewed at the state level through an Act 250 process, and they looked at this language, the plan language, which is what they're charged at looking at, and this were unclear, they might look at the zoning regs for further guidance. I will say that there is a little bit of a discrepancy between the way these plan provisions are worded for these particular resources and what the zoning regs say.
That's what I was thinking.
These are all secondary resources in our scheme of primary and secondary resources in the regulations, meaning that you are directed to minimize your impact on those resources, not completely avoid them at all times, the way you would, say, a wetland or a flood hazard area or a surface water, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So you might be able to thread this needle a little bit by modifying the term to say, for example, in 521, development planning, keep the shall, but development planning shall preserve the town's valuable agricultural resources by directing growth so as to minimize the impact on these resources. And similarly, use the word minimize in 511. I think that would, you can retain the strength of the shall so that it's a directive, you must do it. If Act 250 is looking at this, they're going to tell a developer, the town wants you to do this. It's not a question about whether you do it, you have to do it. But using the word minimize allows for a little bit of nibbling at the edges of these secondary resources, which is what the current regulations call for. You don't get to nibble at the edges of the primary resources, but these are all secondary.
So does that speak to the concern?
Right, if you replace, do not impact these resources with minimize the impact of these resources, that could be a reasonable compromise.
That's what I was thinking. Andrea, Phil, Marilee?
I really think these resources need to be protected. I like the wording the way it is.
But I could see, I mean, I could see some project on a farm that, adding some recreational piece or something that, might be in the best interest to preserve the farm, but provide additional income, and where you might need to have a very slight impact in either the agricultural resource or something else. I mean, I could see a little of that give and take. Mike,
Hey, so one of the questions that I have is, actually, Phil, I thought of things like that too. But if our zoning regulations have already been written, why do you have to redo this as another goal? Hasn't this goal been reached?
Well, that's a good
I mean,
question.
it's just repetition to me.
So Mike, Tom asked the same question at some point in another conversation, and the Planning Commission had the same question as well, I think. Might have actually been when Tom was on the Planning Commission, now I think of it. But in any case, many of these action items are listed here as an operational instruction and aspirational sort of action, so that the DRB has vision and guidance outside of the regulations, but also so that these independent regulatory bodies like the Public Service Board and Act 250 have a clear understanding of what Hinesburg's vision is when the plan is the only document they're looking at least initially, not the regulations. So we don't want to declare victory completely and eliminate these kinds of things that are critical for the community in the plan, because they still need to be said for those other entities. And it reiterates things that, as a visionary document, the community believes in.
The idea around establishing and then maintaining. So once you've established this as a goal, as a community, and then to state it as this is also something we want to maintain as a goal.
Yeah, and some things we do check off the list
Absolutely.
and delete and cross them off, and the other things are sort of onward and forever.
Visionary.
What concerns me about 521 is that this isn't maintenance of a goal, this is a new goal to direct growth away from any agricultural resource. And I think of my property as a good example, because let's just say, the economy tanks, I can't hold on to my property because I can't pay the taxes on it anymore. There is some property out there that I could put a certain number of houses on based upon our plan, the zoning regs. But if I had to go to Act 250 based on 521, that could go poof. because I would be instructed to direct growth away from these locations, regardless of if it's a gravel base, perfect for building, or anything else. That's my concern with that word shall.
Alex, could you speak to how in Act 250 that would come up? Because I don't think it would only come up if somebody challenged the Act 250 permit.
Well, that happens every day.
Well, you know what, 95% of Act 250 permits go through, without challenges. So
Yeah, I think you're both right. I think that the vast majority of Act 250 permits are approved without a hearing and go forward easily. But it's that small percentage that become the high-profile cases where an entrenched opposition can utilize language to their advantage to block a project. And so that's why I was suggesting that since the regs are a little bit more nuanced than these statements with regard to minimizing the impact, if we just made these provisions that Tom's concerned about more consistent with the minimized language in the regs, I think it preserves the intent and still enables somebody opposed to a project at the Act 250 level to make a very strong argument, but it's not more absolute than the DRB's metric that they would apply. It seems like they ought to be similar,
The DRB would have some flexibility.
Yes.
In this.
Yes, for example, in Tom's case, if
yeah.
he developed a portion of the farm or golf course and said, I'm going to cluster everything in this one spot, I'm going to preserve the bulk of the farm, but I need to impact, 2 acres of prime agricultural soil in order for my project to be financially viable to preserve the other 200 acres. The DRB would be able to at least evaluate that and not be prohibited from it. Because the language is not keep off, it's minimize your impact on. For these issues, there are other resources where we're very clear about not impacting them at all.
I guess I just wanted to point out that the Act 250 process itself is not litigious. It's when somebody appeals the Act 250. So I just want to be clear that let's not confuse those two separate processes of getting an Act 250 permit with somebody appealing the Act 250 permit.
Mike?
So how would this work with a town if they wanted to add more fields or something like that, or a recreation space? I mean, they're not gonna, how would that work in that scenario?
Well, I don't think it would be any different than
That's
any other development. They'd have to go through the same hoops and go through the DRB and potentially be challenged.
Yeah, I think you have the regulations should be able to cover all this.
Bill? Yeah, you need the microphone.
Just to maybe give some perspective to what we're talking about, Chapter 5, this was, largely from contribution from the Conservation Commission done at the request of the Planning Commission and addressing strictly the issue of preserving our natural resources, which is what the mission of the Conservation Commission is. It is not to balance the value of our natural resources with development. That is the job of the Planning Commission, the DRB, and the regulations reflect that. I don't think we need to be concerned about that balance in this chapter because I think it is designed strictly to, in a simple world, to simply protect natural resources, but but that's why we have regulations which reflect the real world, and where the Planning Commission is, is involved in that, as is the DRB. So I just wanted to.
So, Joe, you've heard a little discussion about possible change in the language, I think, from Alex, and maybe we could get your opinion on that.
I have no problem in aligning this more closely to the zoning language. That is, after all, what the planning commission proposed and is working today. I think in doing that, you know, the wording may get a little more complicated in that, you know, as Alex, you know, mentioned.
Sorry.
It's gone. That's all right. You know, as Alex mentioned, we do, you know, have the definition of primary resources and secondary resources, and there are things that, you know, we ask to be not touched, those primary resources, and we ask for minimization of secondary resources. But, you know, to answer your basic question, I have no problem aligning this closer to the zoning bylaws.
So, and, you know, I'm feeling too, while I'm, you know, I'm not feeling that will change the shall to should, but I think what Alex was proposing seemed to bring in both sides. We certainly want to protect these areas, but the zoning is what does that, and we've made some changes recently to help that along. But I wouldn't want it to tie our hands to do good development and smart development and accomplish, while accomplishing these goals too, so. Any other thoughts from the board?
So Alex, you have in mind for that sentence, development planning shall preserve the town's valuable agricultural resources by directing growth to minimize impacts to these resources? Something to that effect?
Yeah, by directing growth to locations that minimize the impact on these resources.
Seems reasonable.
It's the middle way.
Andrea? And you're not,
I like it, and I think Bill's point is good, is that we're making statements here, and then they get interpreted by the Planning Commission again as they develop the regulations. So we're trying to be as strong as we can in this statement, and it's balanced by other chapters in here, and that balance comes out in the regulations, in the subdivision and the zoning regulations. So I don't see any harm in being fairly strong in these statements, because they are guidelines for creating the zoning and subdivision, so. But.
yes, Michael?
I just want to make a quick comment that Bill and Bob are here tonight as individuals. The Conservation Commission has not had a full quorum for several years. So when they talk about the Conservation Commission, it's really individual discussion. And I just want to make sure the Select Board realizes that.
Well, I mean, I think they've been on the Conservation Commission, and I think as they talk, I think they represent the Conservation Commission that we've had in place over the last few years.
The last few years has not had a majority, so therefore technically we haven't had a Conservation Commission.
I'd rather not go there right now.
That's fine.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other comments on this? So we're sort of stuck. I'm not sure how we're going to move forward, or perhaps we're not.
I believe Alex's change is a reasonable adjustment to the sentence, which is still quite strong in my opinion. And I mean, really, it just repeats what the zoning is currently after the last update. I'm concerned with the Act 250 aspect of this as a regulatory document.
And I'm feeling like the changes are pretty minor.
Yeah, I am too.
And, you know, would not really drive our development in an opposite direction. I'd always prefer to provide a level of reasonable ability to accomplish what we're trying to do here. So,
Well, when does the Planning Commission meet again?
Next week?
Wednesday? I don't know. I mean, I think,
ask them to
yeah.
take a look
Just
at it.
ask them how they feel about it.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's, the majority of the select board feels comfortable with minimized, but I do still feel that this is a planning commission document, and, it does get down to this wordsmithing,
And I'd like to just repeat what I said before, that the survey after survey, Hinesburg's rural character, it's a phrase. People really appreciate that. That's what draws people here. That's why people like to live here. So I would not be in favor of doing anything to dilute that.
I don't disagree, but I do know that the recent rural zoning tried to go as far as they could to provide opportunities for people who own this land to find ways to maintain it. And that could be, I don't know, a horse riding farm, or, recreational opportunities, or, and maybe in the process of doing that, there might have to be a slight amount of give to preserve that rural character. So
Well, again, I
that's,
agree with what Bill said, that this is about protecting the natural resources, and I think that that's the gist of this chapter, that's the force of this chapter, and there are other places where the balance comes in. I
Fair
don't
enough.
think there's any value in watering this down.
okay.
Marilee, can you answer a question for me? Do you know what used to be where your house is now?
Yes, I do
Okay,
know.
what?
It used to be a working farm, and the land that the houses are built on was not good agricultural land because the slope is too steep.
It could be pasture land. It doesn't have to be.
That
Till
was
soil.
that was the whole point of building there. But this really isn't personal. It's not about your land. It's not about my land. This is about the town of Hinesburg.
It's, people own the land. They pay taxes on the land. This does not match up with what our zoning regulations are.
Well,
This is-
I'm
this is a
comfortable letting the
A completely new tact.
I'm comfortable letting the planning commission take this up.
Yeah, and I don't think it has to match the zoning. I mean, it can be it's a visionary document. It's here's where we're going. It's our plan for our town.
Right, the
And the
vision.
zoning tends to follow it, so, it doesn't have to match up necessarily. Are you okay, Joe, with taking it up with your group and seeing if you have any other recommendations? We can come back to this. Because we could spend a lot of time wordsmithing. Michael?
Yeah, sounds like you're moving on, right?
Yeah, and
I'm open to that.
I'll ask the select board if they have questions, and then as they go, we'll bring it out to the audience. On any other items like this. I didn't mark it up very much.
I have another one here, if we moved on to page 47. 535. Says encourage master planning of larger parcels prior to subdivision through town planning assistance. And I just wonder how that fits in with like a small one-home subdivision. We've talked about it before, a large landowner, they want to subdivide a small parcel for their kids. But if you're going to encourage master planning of the entire parcel, that doesn't seem like it's very practical. Unless it's a large subdivision with 20 homes.
I think that it's important for any landowner, regardless of how much land they want to divide off to at least think about their goals for the overall property. What we talk to landowners about in the office is just making sure they're not boxing themselves into a corner with regard to their future options. And so our my first question to a landowner is, tell me why you're here. What are you seeking to accomplish? Because I know the rules and you know what you want. I don't know what you want, but I probably know the rules better than you do. So tell me what you want, and I can help you figure out what the best way to go about doing that is. And there might be multiple ways to do that. But part of the question of what do you want is the whole. Like, what are you hoping to do with your entire property, even if your most immediate aim is just to subdivide off a lot for a child or a nephew or something like that. So I don't think this is meant to require any sort of master plan in terms of maximum build-out potential, but rather just thinking through the overall property so as not to cut off access to an important stand of timber because they put a house lot right where the logging road needs to go, or otherwise sort of boxing themselves in.
Maybe the word master plan is oftentimes becomes a technical term.
Yeah,
and so maybe
there's a better term.
and really what you're encouraging is for people to come in and talk with you guys, not that they need to go hire a consultant, but just to have a conversation with staff to begin with.
Yeah, and sorry, Joe, I'll give it to you in just a sec. The idea is that this is through town planning assistance, i.e.
Right.
your tax dollars are paying us to
Right.
help you. The other thing is just, I want to reiterate what Gene Isham told me when I first started here, and it was, don't do anything until you know what you want to do with everything, because you could shoot yourself in the foot, and that's where some of this comes from.
So I was going to mention that quote, but I was also going to mention something else. The first word here in this action item is encourage.
Right.
All right? So I take that as a word of advice, not a word of requirement. This is more of an educational, helpful statement in the town plan. It's not a requirement for any landowner to do this. The town plan does not seek to make this a requirement to do this. I just think it's sage advice.
I can think of maybe a different word or phrase for master planning.
Vision.
It's not meant to trigger a negative response.
Right.
It's meant to be we're here to help you.
Well, I understand that with encourage, just when you hear master plan, because master plan is referenced in other parts of the zoning.
And that's what
Yeah.
we're changing.
That it's,
We do have a master plan requirement in the village growth area on parcels larger than an acre, and it does have the meaning that you were thinking, which
Right.
is show us what's going to happen for future development. In the rural parts of town, especially for larger subdivisions, there's no intention to have them map out new roads someday, future roads and all that. So if I can think of a better term, maybe Joe can help me, I can bring it to you.
so I'll go on.
Okay.
541, require adequate uncut vegetated buffers. I don't think that's a bad idea whatsoever. I just think it's already being established as a state regulation. I believe it already is. So I don't know why we would need to have that in there as even a town goal when it's already put forth by the state.
Because the state gets implemented through the town regulations. The state's not coming out here and checking things. I mean,
Well, I also, the word adequate is really important because what the state of Vermont, through a very political process, determined to be an adequate stream buffer area for agricultural operations, many of us think is not, in fact, adequate. So I don't want to speak for Hinesburg because that would be a conversation with the community, but I know that was one of the issues when the required agricultural practices went into effect, that those buffer distances are pretty weak. We might want more robust ones, is what I'm saying. Hinesburg might want more robust ones after conversation.
We might. I just wonder how you would ever enforce it. That's you know.
Yeah,
You're gonna go out and
enforcement is
slap
always
a
a-
farmer on the wrist. I mean, I totally think it's a great idea, but I just don't know how you would ever enforce it beyond what the state is gonna do.
Yeah, that would definitely be part of the effort to come up with a meaningful
Right.
and scientifically based buffer area, and then some treatment of how we're going to enforce it, whether it's purely educational or neighbor tattling, which is what a lot of our zoning is, enforcement's based on, or if there's a more rigorous enforcement protocol.
Complaint-driven statewide.
Yeah. So Phil, you're going to have a hard time making it through even this chapter.
Yeah.
If we've only made it through 2 pages so far.
I started off saying there was a lot in here.
Well, there isn't that much on just these 2 pages, so I don't know if there's a way to, you know, grease the skids or if we just keep plodding.
Sort of, yeah, I think we can keep moving and seeing what time it is when we get through this chapter.
Anybody have any other questions or suggested revisions in the other sections, like surface water or groundwater, wetlands?
I wanted to strongly support 5.8.2 under the wetlands section.
Right, yeah, and this is sort of looking at ourselves in the mirror and saying we need to do a better job of helping community members understand what these resources are.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we could also just work on doing some better mapping. You know, we have that UMass study, and that's included in the, you know, the state, but we could actually ask them, petition the state to include some of them on the state wetlands map, and I think.
Right, so that's exactly what that recommendation says.
Yes, exactly. You know, I think we might actually have some eligible Class 1 wetlands that could be reclassed, I mean, some Class 2s that could become Class 1, so.
Yep, the Car Swamp jumps to the front of my mind for that.
What's
So any revisions? We all appreciate accolades and endorsements, but anything you want different?
I guess I would, in the wildlife habitat section, 5.1.0, I would like to change that word resources to systems, because overall, I mean, I was glad to see the chapter title say ecological systems. So this is page 60. And just the more that we can think about these systems aside from their use to us.
So are you in the goal, 510?
I'm the goal, 5.1.
Okay, so just change ecological resources to ecological systems?
Yeah, since that's what's in the title.
Yeah, it certainly would be consistent with the chapter title.
Yeah.
I always think it conveys the same thing, but you have a more nuanced view of it, Andrea, so it sounds good to me, if the rest of your board is good with that.
Michael?
A couple questions. On page 49, on the second column down near the picture, it talks about where it starts out preserving agricultural land while maintaining the landowner's equity in the land.
Where was this again?
It's opposite the bottom picture, and it starts out preserving agricultural land while maintaining the landowner equity in the land. It's right near the bottom of the second paragraph, I guess, is what I want. Page 48.
Oh, 48. Oh, sorry.
What did I tell you?
Oh, 48.
I lied to you. Page 48, second paragraph towards the bottom, preserving agricultural land while maintaining landowners' equity. Was there any discussion in the Planning Commission about helping the landowners with transition? And maybe at the same time you could talk about protecting landowners' property rights while at the same time trying to conserve these properties, and ideas about doing that. I mean, all I've heard tonight is about land acquisition fund, and I was like to hear a little more about the creativity involved of working with landowners to keep their space open after they get older and it becomes they can't work it anymore.
What would that look like? What do you, 'cause I'm, okay.
I mean, I've heard a lot about regulations this and regulations that and increasing buffer zones and things like that. And I was just trying to think about farmers get older and they need to get rid of their land. So transition's a big issue with farming. And the other part is private landowners who own the land that we use for recreation, and how can the town, other than saying we're going to buy it or gain access, conserve it, how can we, are there ways talked about to allow them equity as when it comes time for them to get rid of it or sell it? Or it becomes an economic burden to them. More humanistic.
I mean, you could say the same, somebody owns a large house and all of a sudden their family's all gone and now they've got this large house that they've got to, yeah.
So I would direct Mike to goal 5.3 on page 46. There are a few action items that speak to that under that goal, but there isn't there is not, I don't believe, an action item that talks about the town engaging in some sort of an education outreach program for farms in transition or large landowners in a transition or estate planning or anything like that. It talks about in 534 adjusting and fine-tuning allowed uses to keep pace with trends in value-added agriculture and forestry, such that as large landowners come up with more innovative uses of their lands, we continue to allow them to innovate. And it does talk about conservation and the land acquisition fund. Talks about promoting local agriculture and marketing of value-added products in 531. But you're right, Mike, I don't think there's an idea, and I don't, Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the Planning Commission had the idea that the town would be, or could serve in sort of an advisory
Guidance,
role,
yeah.
except to the extent that we encourage them to think comprehensively about the property in a master planning sort of way. Am I missing something from the conversations, Joe?
No, I don't think
you are. Okay.
I mean, I think well, 5.3, talks about working with the Vermont Land Trust and Nature Conservancy. I mean, that is one of the services that that they do provide is kind of that estate planning and transition for farmers. But we could just, I think, include a different action item and just, encourage transition planning or with appropriate regional and state, because there's our other organizations that help do that, and we could certainly, the town could put on, some seminars on that and talk on that, on how people can go about doing that.
So I don't know if this would water down 533, which is identified as a top priority item, but if those groups, the land trusts and the various state and national nonprofits already do work with large landowners in estate planning and transitioning to younger family members or new farmers, should we maybe just expand 533 to cover what Mike's talking about, to encourage landowners to work with those groups in in transition planning and the
And,
like.
and it's not
'Cause I
just
don't
land,
see us
it's
doing
not
it.
just.
That's where I'm going. I don't think the town has the expertise to provide those services, but we could certainly refer people to these other agencies that we partner with to help them with those services. I certainly don't have that
And it
expertise.
doesn't have to be tied to the
Land
land acquisition fund. I
right.
mean,
Right.
a lot of that stuff can happen without
Right.
the land
That's what I mean, is
yeah.
if we broaden 533, I think it would change the nature of that action item to be talking about both.
Yeah, it could be that, or
Acquisition
it could
and
be-
or
yeah.
just advisement. Or we could do it as a separate action item if you want to take Mike's suggestion and put something in. But I think I could add it.
Well, I mean, you're identifying who would probably help in this, in that 533, so I think, but what you're saying is, you could bring in these resources, but the only solution they're talking about is using the land acquisition fund, and it may be, so if we could refer to, other solutions, I mean, there's a
In fact,
realization.
I would even take that, because we've talked about that fund in other places, and this is really
Just to encourage
just
the
to encourage
voluntary-
the transition. I mean, what is different? Well, it is different, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, Mike, how's a?
Just one more point. One of the points, I love what you're talking about, but one of the points I was trying to get is try to get away from taking it from private to public,
But it's not, I mean,
by keeping it private to private and helping that. And I'm not getting that message. I like your idea,
Right.
but the message that I'm getting is there's land trust and things like that, and I understand that part. But is there a way for somebody to? Is there planning in the town to preserve land from private person to a private person?
but that is what,
Well, I'm thinking of the Carses.
But I'm talking about the Full Moon Farm. Isn't that what happened with your family's property, the Full Moon Farm, that went from private to private through?
and that's what happened on the Eddy Farm,
help with
and
the
that's what
land
happened
trust.
on the Isham Farm. There were private transactions, and those are conserved lands, and it happened with the support of the Vermont Land Trust, and those were private to private.
And I'm just thinking that.
I think we're hearing what you're saying, and if you look at 533, it says, hey, here are some resources, and it kind of says, here's the solution, and there
Right,
might be,
which is
there
to
might
use
be a
the
little bit
acquisition
more
fund.
to it.
Yeah, what I'm proposing is broaden 533 to say there are other solutions besides just buying the land.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think we all realize that what we have now for farms or existing land that's being used is, oh boy. They're all gonna have to evolve over the next 50, 100, 200 years. They're not gonna be doing exactly what they're doing today. And so that's sort of saying, hey, we'll have,
So if you're all in
provide
agreement,
resources.
I'll hand the mic to this other
Yes.
person, but I'd be happy to make that change and move on.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, just as maybe helpful, that Mike's question was actually addressed in the green space plan. Now, it may have been edited out of a latest version, but there was, I believe, under the recommendations in agricultural, and I'm not talking about what's in here, but the plan itself did make reference to various organizations that might provide farmers or retiring farmers with advice. And so I would
Maybe take a look
may
at
want to
that.
just check that first.
Okay? That was good. Thank you, Bill. We were up through into the wildlife habitat, but maybe not.
It was on 54, page 54, 573 groundwater. Considering low yield wells in new development. Do we really need that layer? I understand there's parts of town where wells are not the best, but to add a layer of regulation for that seems a little bit over the top.
Which one?
5.7.3.
It's been our practice for some time within that triangle portion of town, sort of in the eastern side of the Richmond Road neighborhood, and up and down the North Road to have a developer demonstrate that. It hasn't happened very often, so do we really need it? I don't know. We get arguments from certain developers that that's gonna sort itself out with the state permits and the actual well drilling, because if they can't make a well produce, they're not gonna create, they're not gonna be building. But the argument has always been, why would we allow the subdivision to happen in the first place to create the fragmentation for building lots if it's unlikely that those lots could be served without, the demonstration of an adequate water supply, at least in these few areas that have very low yields. So I don't want to make it out to be more than it is. We have utilized it. It's utilized infrequently because we don't see that much development in the low yield area. That's about as much as I can say about it, Tom.
I would say that it's been a good practice, and that it's, what happens when we do have low yields is then it becomes a responsibility for the town itself, and I think it's a good planning and proactive recommendation. So I think it's also important to let people know of the areas where the radon is. So.
There's just a little update on page 55. 5 wells are part of the municipal water system. I think that's been reduced now, right?
Oh. Officially, maybe? I'm not sure.
Talking about
Left-hand column.
second bullet, 4 and 5.
No, he's in the paragraph
I'm in the
above
paragraph.
where the sentence in the middle says there are 7 public water supply wells in Hinesburg, 5 of which are part of the municipal water system. But then the bullets clarify that 2 of those 5
Inactive.
became inactive in 2016.
Okay.
I could pull that up
It
into
doesn't,
that
it's just a-
paragraph, but I think it,
Housekeeping thing, that's all.
yeah. They're still part of the water system, as I understand it. They're just inactive.
Yeah.
Like, we could reactivate them. Should we run into, am I right, Trevor? If we ran into emergency, could we turn them back on?
There'd be a number of steps to that, but theoretically.
Well, I think there's also something in here about looking into ways of dealing with the MBTEs on those wells. So they technically are wells, and that might be a solution, is to invest in.
All right. What else you got?
I'm ready to go into 6.
I'm gonna do a time check just before we move into 6. Mike, did you have something for 5?
I just wondered about the green space plan, if the select board had thought any more about voting on it.
Yeah, I don't think.
Only one select board, one elected official, Andrea, has seen the green space plan.
I haven't seen.
2015, he saw it. You were at the meeting. I just wonder about that.
I don't think.
We've
What are you referring to, Mike?
seen it come through
So
here.
it's, let me just clarify, the green space plan is addressed on page 64 of the town plan. So it is addressed in this chapter that we're talking about, and there are no action items that refer to it, but there is a section that recognizes what green space is, and that's on page 64. And then it talks about the process that the Conservation Commission went through starting back in 2007 to come up with the green space plan that was finalized last year. And so it basically talks about the fact that there was a process, the Conservation Commission came up with a product, and then this plan looked at that and pulled in relevant pieces, and it's up to you to decide whether any of those are objectionable or fantastic or what have you. It's not, this, as you can see from page 64, this plan doesn't incorporate the green space plan by reference. The green space plan isn't referred to as a duly adopted town-wide.
It's not an addendum to this plan.
Right. It was an effort that was conducted like a lot of committees conduct efforts. The Affordable Housing Committee, for example, conducted an effort and had commissioned a study on a housing needs assessment at one time. And again, in Chapter 2, we pulled in, certain recommendations from that study. So I understand Mike's point, but at the same time, it wasn't, the decision was made at some point in the process, and I was part of that, to not bring it before the Select Board as a document to be thrashed and debated and eventually adopted by the Select Board. It was made to have it be a document that the Conservation Commission spent an awful lot of blood, sweat, and tears on and brought to fruition, which is then used as a reference to come up with other things. It is on the town website if anybody does want to look at it. I do have hard copies upstairs if anybody wants a hard copy, the green space plan, that is. The final version, yeah.
Are we all set with Chapter 5 at this point? And I'm just looking at the time here. Our hope was to be done with this before 9 o'clock. It's now
Almost
25 of 10. I think we have an option. We could push this next chapter out, which seems reasonable after 3 meetings of 11:30, but
I'm okay with that.
This chapter out, does that mean
To the
plow
next-
through it or do it next time?
do it next time. Yeah.
Oh. You
Is-
mean-
Unless,
I
Not
think if
be
you
here
spend
till
some real
midnight?
time with it ahead of the next meeting, you could get through Chapter 6 very quickly.
Yeah,
There's
it-
not a
it's-
lot of.
no, there's not.
Of policy from the standpoint of differing philosophical viewpoints. Chapter 6 is much more just wrote, this is what our community looks like.
I have lots of notes in Chapter 6.
Yeah, me too.
But there might not be a lot there.
So
More
Frank,
than,
oops, sorry.
go ahead, no.
Frank Twag was here on behalf of the Recreation Commission. I guess he had to leave, so we may want to apologize to
Okay.
the
Well, I was-
hardy soul, Tom, who's sat through this, probably waiting for that chapter.
Were you waiting for that, Tom?
Lenore was here for that chapter.
Oh, and Lenore
No.
too. Sorry, Lenore, I didn't mean to
Yeah, so,
be out there.
if that would be a hardship, I mean, we'd certainly recognize that. In 2 weeks from now,
Yep.
Maybe early in the calendar?
earlier in the night?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'd have to look at what's on the agenda. I know.
That one's expansive. So that'll be the trick in that one.
Is that, did you? It's okay?
Yeah, I was planning to come for the dog ordinance.
Oh, okay.
I think we're
Isn't
making
everyone?
we're making good progress, right, Alex?
Yeah, I think so.
So really, we're,
Yeah.
I think it's gone pretty well the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I
so.
think so. You got a little bogged down tonight, but otherwise, I think it's been going well. This was a very long chapter, you're right. So-
Yeah, there was a lot in,
And it's a weighty one, because natural resources, big deal in Hinesburg. Okay,
All right.
great, thank you.
I think I'm gonna just say, take a 5 minutes. And we will come back at 20 of, 4 minutes. Thank you, Alex.
Soggy on the course, on the golf course?
The next item on the agenda is the transition for the town administrator. We had a little discussion the last time we met, and we had said Aaron and I would, we had a meeting with Trevor and Renee to sort of talk about it and sort of put some ideas out there. I think a couple of options we discussed was this potential search could go through VLCT, they can provide those services, or perhaps a committee of select board members, employees, parts of the staff, some community members, similar to what we did last time. I think we had maybe 14 in the committee. It was quite a large committee, but seemed pretty successful, very successful, I might add. So that was one thing we discussed. We also, we talked a little with Renee and whether, you know, she would consider being an interim or help us through this transition. So I think it's fair to say she would consider that. And we talked about whether Renee would, you know, potentially be a candidate. And I think it's fair to say potentially she might. We also talked about the position now is a town administrator, and I think the term we used was a super town administrator, you know, an attempt to provide some additional, I don't want to use the word power, more authority as a town administrator. And then we also discussed you know, potentially a town manager, which was something that was maybe 4 years ago, or maybe longer than that. Yeah. A while ago, there was some discussion and a vote that didn't pass, but I think it was fairly close. And I can say that with this transition happening, there's been a few folks from town that have come to me and sort of said this could be an opportunity to look at a town manager. So we discussed that a little bit and you know, how that would fit in. I don't know, Aaron, did you want to talk about that just for a moment of, you know, maybe the timing concerns, if we were to consider that, and maybe a couple options around that?
Yeah, so looking at those options as Trevor helps us sort of lay out a time frame and what our goals are for wanting to achieve this, they have to kind of align in order to know what it is we're trying to do. So if we stay with the town administrator type of scenario where we're just one for one swapping, you know, a new employee comes in and replaces Trevor's role, nothing else changes, just it's not Trevor, it's somebody else. A realistic plan which Trevor laid out for us would be somewhere around October 1st, possibly at the earliest, somewhere around there. As when we could reasonably expect somebody. And then everything stays the same. Another scenario might be that if we take the feedback that we're getting from Trevor as he's transitioning and look at what our practice has been for the last 3 years, Trevor? Has it been 3 years you've been here, or thereabouts? And look at the way the job description is written, and then honestly ask ourselves, is this what we want? Is this what, if we're hiring for this, but we're acting this way, do those line up? And then approaching the conversation from maybe town manager is what we want to do, and I'm definitely wanting to pursue that conversation and see where that leads us. I think there's support in the community for it through, you know, our previous vote. there's certainly an argument for it. I think the services that we provide as a town almost demand it. But I think that would be a healthy conversation to have, and I think that would be a conversation to have at this point, because then if you're looking at hiring somebody and you've just hired a town administrator October 1st, but you're going to, if we choose to do this, go to the town and say, hey, let's change this to town manager, and that happens at a November election time, that's a month from now, how is it that you're going to hire somebody for a town administrator if you've just changed the job the next month to town manager? And so do you just hire for town manager? Anyway, there's some complexity to how you want to time that. So say we did go to a town manager conversation, and the board wants to recommend to the voters to go in that direction, and the voters say, yeah, let's do that, and say that happens in November, and the hiring process brings somebody perhaps locally, maybe at least to Vermont, but at least thinking, somebody who's in a Vermont state of mind also is looking at potentially in whatever town they're in already, town meeting. So if you're starting to hire November, well, it would be December, January, they're looking at town meeting right in front of them, so we're not necessarily going to have maybe a applicant pool until after that period of time, so about a year from now, which gets us through the summer, through the process. It gets us about next fall, maybe, where we would have a town manager come on board, if that's the direction we want to go. So those are a couple of possible timelines. There's a lot in play in both of those scenarios, but it's something to consider as we think about what services that as a town we want to offer, what services we do offer. The feedback we're getting from, in my time now, 3 town administrators exiting and providing feedback as to how we could improve, plus others telling us. I would like to have that conversation and talk about the pros and cons of town manager, town administrator, and with that question somewhat resolved, then move forward with, I think that will dictate where we go with, we hiring a town manager, town administrator, exactly replacing one for one. Are the services that we're offering now best provided by the way that we're structured through the departments, and how can we improve on this? We have an opportunity to make this better with feedback that's being given to us and through observational knowledge of how the last 10 years have gone, say, pick a period of time. I think there's a lot that we can improve upon here and gain this sort of wisdom that we have of having gone through this, because all of us, I think, have been pretty attuned to what's been going on here for the last decade. So we have perspective, and I think we can move forward with this in a very open-minded, knowledgeable kind of a place. We're not coming out of any kind of, there's no questions, I think the conversation would be good to have. And I'm curious to know what the rest of the board thinks about that.
So the next steps that are planned, which aren't, the next steps that are planned is a meeting with myself, potentially Aaron and Trevor, to talk about, one-on-one how things have gone, feedback on the town, some town employees, just get a complete sort of rundown from his perspective. We will do the same with Renee, get a rundown from her perspective. It's not one versus the other, it's just sort of a free flow of information. We did talk about trying to get together as a board specifically, I'll call it an off-site, but it's some specific time to sort of talk about options and where we go from there. I'm not sure if we might, at that point or at the next meeting, need to have an executive session, which is a possibility. If we wanted to talk about personnel, we could certainly do that. But I think at this point, you know, the chalkboard is clear. There's not a lot on there, or, you know, we can start putting stuff on there, but as we thought about it and as Aaron discussed, you know, there's a few options here, and now is the time to sort of explore it, I guess, a little bit, and get what people are thinking.
And understanding the decision we make now impacts us. It sets our course for a while.
So to answer Aaron's question as to whether I'd like to see town manager pursued, my answer is yes. I think we're at the point where the town is big enough, there's enough responsibilities. I think simply in order to be able to attract qualified candidates, we may have to take that step. Really, I think it's important for them to have certain protections that a town manager provides. It just allows them some leeway to do their job in a way that's effective. I'm not sure we have that right now. And besides that, it's been highly recommended to me by other town managers that that's the route we should go.
It's good feedback.
Marilee or Andrea?
I need to know more about the difference between a town manager and a town administrator. Am I reading between the lines correctly that we've hired Trevor as a town administrator and we've been asking him to do the work of a town manager?
I think there was an attempt to give Trevor more authority on the HR and side of things, managing people, I think. So sort of in between. Whether that was successful or not could be debated, but I mean, Andrea, you were here and you went through the vote for town manager.
Yeah, with the vote for town manager, and I think when we, you know, that was at the time when actually Joe came, and I think that began a transition of the select board. It certainly is a very different board, and the way that we operate is very different than it was, you know, 10 years ago. I think there's been some really positive changes that have happened with those, from those changes. I think it's important for, you know, what our responsibilities are on the select board, I think, is important to understand when we're talking about the context of a town administrator and a town manager. Because, you know, the town manager, you can look at the job description, you can look in statute of what they're supposed to do, and then it really becomes an issue of really, well, because I think there's this kind of belief that, you know, government should run more like a business, and therefore you have a top executive, a CEO, and that's really the position that the town manager has. And so what role does a board play in that? And I think that, you know, town government select boards really have kind of limited power in Vermont government. You know, our job responsibility is to establish a budget and bring it to the voters. And that voters, and that's where I really feel strongly about understanding the relationship between the town manager and the voters also. So really understand how it plays into our vision of town governance and democracy, and who gets say. So I'm certainly willing to, I welcome the opportunity to talk about it so that we can talk about it in the context of voters and citizens, and understanding the messiness of democracy and town government and the opportunity for there to be a really engaged citizenry. And I think that I wouldn't want to diminish that. And I think there's the balance of citizen participation is important. And but I can see the role for management. I think, you know, as the number of employees has expanded, it definitely became evident that that we needed that responsibility and authority. But I was going to say that, you know, when Joe got hired was right when we did that vote. And so it was, I mean, I think we made a lot of changes at that point. So, and we've continued to make changes.
And everything you speak to, I think we could even build upon, perhaps in this conversation as we move forward with whatever decision we make. I think those are all really good points that have to be considered along the way. Fortunately, it's not new ground that we have to figure out. Many have gone before us, and I think there's a lot of precedent out there. There's a lot of experience out there, and there's a lot of people that we can reach out to, both as board members, as citizens, as employees, to understand how other towns have made this transition and what has worked, what would they do differently, and what can we incorporate into our decision-making. Now, maybe we don't go to a town manager, and maybe we just modify how we do the town administrator. Maybe that town administrator is, for sake of argument, less responsibilities spread over more people, perhaps. Maybe that's the way we do it. Maybe there's efficiencies in that. Maybe that's one of the ways to speak to the messiness and citizen involvement and checks and balances. Maybe that is one scenario. But I think this would be a really great conversation to have. And I think now is the time to do it, certainly with this opportunity. Knowing that whatever decision we make, we have two things that we're looking at. We're looking at what we are going to be, but we're also looking at May 27th and what we are. And that's really the immediate thing that is on our plate right now. And as Phil said, we're going to have those discussions this week. We're going to have continued with those discussions this week and get ourselves a plan. We've already started that. Having conversations with Trevor as to what's on his plate right now, what can't be dropped, what can be just put on the back burner, whatever metaphor you want to use. But we've started those, certainly. But those are the two things going on.
Yeah, and I think we have to acknowledge that, we're coming up against a hard stop that, impacts Renee.
Absolutely.
Significantly. So, we've got to make a decision, and that includes the town and Renee, on what happens next.
And I think town staff is also thinking the same thing, honestly.
Yeah.
What's happening next?
Yeah.
There might be one here asking that question.
So in terms of that, if Renee said she would consider, say, being the interim, whatever it is, we're not going to ask her to do both jobs. So are we going to hire then somebody to do the job she's doing now? How would that work?
I think we would have to figure out what we're
That's
doing,
a good question.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question that we need to determine, because we've done this before, haven't we, Renee? How'd that go for you? No need to answer that. I'll say that you did an awesome job, but you worked morning, noon, and night, right? And I wouldn't feel comfortable putting you in that position again, and I don't think you would allow me to.
Yeah, it would not be fair.
Alex. Thank you for
So just a couple things, maybe three. One, you've done this before. So to some extent, I'm hearing retreading, but if you are going to retread, just remember that we've had these conversations before. There was a townwide vote. 2, changing someone's title doesn't do anything about their workload. Right? So there's a town administrator and there's a special projects coordinator, and if you give the town administrator a new title, it's the same work. So just keep that in mind. And 3...
Well, that's true, but, you know, and I'm not trying to, you know, this is just sort of in a hypothetical position. It might be the same amount of work, but if you've asked them to put one arm behind their back while they're doing it, you know, because I think of myself as managing departments and people, you know, one time 100 people. And so if I have authority to do that, then then I can go off and do it. Whether it's successful or not's another story. But if you don't have the authority or you don't have the tools to get it done,
I won't argue with
it's
you.
harder.
You know
Yeah.
the situation between yourself and your principal staff person better than I do, but even as a policy board with a town manager who's empowered to make more employment level decisions, you're still the policy board that drives the policy of the town. And if you as a board are dysfunctional or have a hard time reaching consensus and drag your staff into that mix, it doesn't matter what you call that staff person, they're still going to have trouble getting the job done. So I'd just be careful of getting enamored of a title change, thinking that that's going to solve a problem that you may perceive.
Yeah.
And then 3, if you are going to have a longer conversation, which I'd rather you didn't have, but I understand why you want to do it. Makes sense to me. But if you want to have the larger conversation and that's going to take time, bring in an interim. You know, let Renee do her job that she's doing well, and bring in somebody like Hank, who we had last time, who can be the person to just sort of steer the ship while you're having all these conversations. A, because it's not fair to Renee to make her do both jobs, as you just discussed. But B, because it just seems like, especially if Renee's interested in applying for the position, it would be better to have someone else doing it in the interim. And it allows everyone to just sort of take stock of the situation, allow all the personalities and situations to evolve, and there's no harm, there's no hurt feelings, there's no feeling of obligation, and there's no, I don't know, I just think that interim is a way to deal with it if you're not willing to put a job ad out in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm a little frustrated that Trevor has given us a lot of notice, and potentially he could be gone before you ever advertise the job. And that was like, how much notice was it? 3 months or 2 months? So I'm a planner. I'm glad that you're thinking about it and you want to plan through it, but at the same time, you know, be thinking about the short-term and long-term. You may be making a decision about something that's going to, like you said, take you a year, and you're going to be going to the voters and all that jazz. So we do have work to be done. It doesn't stop, and a little bit of a hiccup isn't going to sink the boat, but if we're twiddling our thumbs for too long, we're going to have some issues.
So perspective on the interim idea. So Hank came in last time around.
Right.
Taking Hank out of it, but just a person coming in. Did that work as a staff member for you?
I think we probably all have different ideas of whether it worked. I thought it did. I thought that he was a seasoned person who knew his role was not to introduce new initiatives, not to shake up the boat, but just to keep everything moving forward and manage the people. I think if we could find somebody like that who is, maybe retired, maybe doing interim work as their retirement job, they could bridge us for 6 to 9 months without chewing up and spitting out a staff person who's critical to keeping the actual day-to-day operations going. But I don't want to speak for Renee. I'm just giving you my perspective on what I think a good situation would be. If you ask me right now, I would say, I wish you would advertise the job already for a town administrator. And you could have interviews with that person and tell them, just like you told Joe Colangelo, we're having a conversation about maybe boosting this to a town manager, but we haven't decided yet, and we may put this back in front of the voters, just like we did 6 years ago, at least you would have been that much further along in hiring somebody, where at this point, it looks like Trevor's going to leave and, you know, we're not even going to have a job ad out.
That's fair enough, and so, you know, we met, and then today I was thinking before we met, before the meeting, saying, you know, and I talked about maybe doing an off-site meeting with this group here, just to sort of, you know, lay it all out there and then decide what actions we're gonna take. And I'm wondering now if, you know, we do have these meetings for this week, and then perhaps this group could meet next Monday night. We could have a select board meeting, and if necessary, go to executive session, if necessary, but have a select board meeting where we can hash out what specific actions we might want to take. And maybe that action is, you know, this interim, and start moving on it, or not. But, yeah, I think you're right. If we wait another couple weeks, we're going to be looking at the end of the line and not have done, really taken any action. And either way, we've got to take this interim action.
I agree, you know, and I, you know, fully take that for what it is, you know, that frustration. You know, we don't move quickly. We could at least make an attempt to move a little quicker and get through whatever meetings we're going to have this week. And as much as I don't particularly want to do it, I think it would be probably beneficial to have us work through that on Monday, you know, and maybe anything else that we might need to make the following meeting easier. I don't know, but that being the primary, I think, you know, it's May 8th, next Monday. You know, even if we had somebody, are they going to start May 27th? Exactly. To Alex's point.
Well, I don't want to.
No, I know. No, I know it isn't.
We will survive for several weeks to a month without a town administrator. But
I agree, but if we don't act now, when are we going to act? Is your point.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't know, that's the message I'm hearing loud and clear. I mean, I hear that even without you telling me that, honestly. You know, you have to live it every day, I just think it.
Well, I'm also thinking that if we can get it together to advertise or not, we need to get somebody in place to carry what Trevor is carrying. Otherwise, I'm just seeing it's all going to fall on Renee's shoulders, and that's not acceptable.
A portion of it will, and a portion of it won't just get carried at all.
Well, that's not acceptable either.
Renee, did you have anything you want to say? You just gotta use the
Gotta use the microphone, Renee.
Does anybody can hand that to Renee? Oh, okay.
Got it. I think whatever you guys decide, it's going to impact me if I'm here, because bringing a completely new person in is going to put more on my shoulders. Whereas I'm going to have that experience and the knowledge of the who to go to if I don't have the process in place, and I have the different resources available. So, but this time around, I do want to make sure, whether it's me or someone else, that if it's me doing it, then I need to have another person in my, to support me. Because last time around, I did it for a 5 to 6 month period solo, and I carried both roles, so. But I did it, so anyway.
Okay.
But I have expressed my willingness to serve in that interim position.
So we have a potential action to have a meeting next Monday night.
What are people's schedules?
I can do it.
I know.
I mean, we couldn't have it any sooner than, we still have to have 3 days anyway, so, right? We could have an emergency.
Special or emergency,
yeah, I
but
suppose.
yeah, some of it's just the pulling, if you wanted to, if it's a special meeting for a single topic, that's an easier lift than if we're adding a meeting and gonna throw some other stuff in there too.
I would suggest it's a single topic, and I would suggest over the next day or two, we might see if there's anybody we want to bring in to help give us some advice.
To that meeting, you're saying?
Yeah.
Or to talk independently and bring that advice with us?
Either one.
Or both, yeah, okay.
Either one.
Well,
Tom, you were concerned about Monday, I don't know.
I was just wondering if there's any day during the week, this week, maybe if Mondays aren't great for me, but if need be, I can do it. That's the job.
For me, that would be the logical one. I don't know. Andrea, your thoughts? Is that going to... Aaron?
Monday works for me. Tuesday wouldn't. Wednesday could maybe work. Thursday doesn't. Friday maybe.
And I can't do it any other evening this week. Next week, I could also do it Thursday, Monday or Thursday.
So Tom, if that's all right, we'll do
Can we
this
make it,
Monday.
if we meet Monday, can we make it 7:30?
I think we could do that.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah. How's that? 7:30?
7:30 is fine. It's a one-topic
Yeah.
meeting, so that would be
Yeah.
7:35, man?
maybe 7:35.
You're 5 minutes.
Any-
Is it a public meeting?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
But would we want,
We could go into executive session if we think that's necessary.
Yeah, but it's open to it's gonna be a published agenda and.
Yeah, I think it has to be, yeah. Go ahead.
but it's going to be a single topic, and would the expectation be that it be an executive session, or?
I think that might be appropriate, because I think, we're talking personnel, so
Yeah.
I think that it would be appropriate.
I want to schedule two pieces, because some of the stuff, the structural stuff you could talk about
Yeah, right.
open, but then leave you
Right.
the avenue when it comes to, if you want to do something
And I would-
different with some
and I
of the
would
individual
expect,
pieces.
coming out of the meeting, we have a decision on some aspect of this conversation.
Possibly.
Some short-term aspect of this conversation. By laying the groundwork for the long-term stuff. I mean, just time is of the essence, is what I'm thinking.
Well, I could see that if it's going to be a structure meeting, and we're going to be talking about town manager kind of stuff at that it will end up being a very lengthy meeting
Well,
with public
yeah.
coming, so I'm
Yeah, I
trying
mean,
to,
I think-
are we thinking
yeah.
about how we're going to address something in the next couple months and not get into this broader
Right.
discussion? Then I would say, let's keep that focused and
Yeah.
let's not have this broader
That's
discussion.
what I'm thinking.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
all
what I'm
right.
That's what I'm thinking too.
My-
I don't
yes.
want to,
Right, I think, we just sort of talked about hypothetical, possibilities, and one was, geez, get this town manager option that is out there, we want to consider everything, but what I've heard tonight is like, we can't really wait for that, and I think Alex clearly said, that if we wanted to go that route, that could be done afterwards. In the meantime, we've got to worry about the short term, the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And what are we doing?
And I think to your point, Andrea, that is exactly what I want to have some sort of clarity on coming out of our meeting on Monday, is the next 6
Yeah.
months or whatever period.
Right, and I think you had mentioned a potential election in November, but there's no election this November.
Right.
It would have to be a special election.
Yeah.
So it would be
So maybe
more
it'd be
like
March.
it would be more like March, if that
Good
was
point.
something to be considered.
Yep, good point.
So I don't think we need.
So
to
that just
act-
further pushes that out a little bit more, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that could be okay, that's fine.
So I don't think we need an action to say we're gonna have a meeting. Is that okay with everyone? I don't think we need to have a motion to say we're gonna have a meeting.
Oh, right.
and I don't think we need to have VCAM here.
No. Ken.
I'll be in Charlotte.
Okay. I mean, I don't know, maybe other people think we do.
No,
but-
I don't think so. I think it's,
Why,
you know, it's an open meeting.
yeah, just to play devil's advocate, why wouldn't we, if they were
If
able
we
to make
could.
it, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine with me too, if they, but it
We
shouldn't
talk a
hold
lot
us
about
up. Wouldn't hold us up.
transparency
Yeah,
and process, and then
right.
we don't, I just,
yep.
if
no,
we get them
that's
here, there's some merit to
Fair
it.
enough, so if we can, that would be good, I think. But it shouldn't hold us up if we can't.
Okay.
Is that good? Alex, yeah? No, that's all right.
I'm going to require that you're at it.
All right, do you have anything, Trevor, to add, or you good? Next item is approving a second-class liquor license, number 12, for Hinesburg General Store. And it doesn't say it here, but make sure we sign every page if we were to move forward.
I'll make a motion that the select board approve a second-class liquor license for...
Oh, we have to move into the, yeah,
Make a
liquor
motion
control
to
part.
convene as the Board of Liquor Control.
I'll second that. if
All
no one
right,
else did
any
already.
discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So we are now convened as the Liquor Control Board.
So now I'll make a motion that the select board approve a second-class liquor license for the period beginning May 1st, 2017 and expiring April 30th, 2018 for R&A Frost Incorporated, doing business as Hinesburg General Store.
Second.
Any discussion?
Same standard question, anything that we know, or anything we should know as per this application?
No, this is our last one for a second consecutive year, that's,
Okay.
and the design is, it's a coffee stain, that's my fault, so it's not artwork.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed.
Motion to adjourn as the Board of Liquor Control.
Oh,
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, the motion's passed. Number 13, Town Administrator's Report. Trevor, do you want to?
A few things, the missing date in section A, that's from an earlier draft, the 4 periods, 6/1/17 is what's specified for the Richmond Road extension. In the stipulated agreement under C, we mentioned it when Mike was in another time, but we'd like to talk about loader replacement. On the 15th, that's what that note is for. I was going to see about maybe an early start time on May 15th. That agenda keeps getting longer. In addition to what you see there, we recently found out this is good news in terms of we are going to be recipients of both a Class 2 paving grant, such as we've talked about, and a Town Highway Structures grant. So those are two things we had hoped for during the budgeting process. So there'll be some elements to that. We have the Baldwin Road designs and all that back that we went out and had an engineer do. We thought about putting that on that one. We have potential selection of a zoning administrator candidate. And then, so those are all potential additions to what you see on 515.
Start a half an hour earlier? I mean,
If we can start a half hour earlier, maybe do some, try to, to play around and see what you guys think, but.
I think we can leave that option open.
Yeah.
I can do it.
And then there's a potential executive session on a couple of legal matters. The Palmer McGee Hill Road scenario, and then maybe an update on Observatory Road.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was going to come back.
And I would propose if there is executive session, we do that in that first half hour.
Okay. Yep, we'll have a better sense of that here. The other note that's not part of the 2 and 2, street sweeping on Monday and Tuesday in the village area, so. We'll put
From the state.
Nope, that'll be ours. We'll rent a unit and hit our streets.
And how about those sidewalks that are, I'm not pointing at Renee or
Yeah.
Alex, I'm pointing at the sidewalks that are full of, like, that much sand.
Yeah, one section we're trying to come up with a plan pointing in that direction. Yeah, it was the same section we're thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah. So it might be hand sweeping courtesy of the highway crew. That's what that might be for that one section.
What, are we subcontracting out a machine to come in, or Getting a,
Renting a street sweeper, yes. For the town-owned village area roads. Creekside, Mechanicsville.
Like
Thistle
we've done
Hill,
in years past, right?
Like we've done
Yeah.
before.
So maybe you could talk with Mike about, you know, that particular area. I mean, if they got a machine that would do it, that would be ideal. Yeah, yeah.
Let's try it.
but it's not, it's doing the town roads, it's not doing 116, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay, that's.
The street sweeper was 116 as well? We're gonna do that? All right, so I misspoke.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, then it could potentially get part of the sidewalk.
All right. Anything else? The highway garage project, the RFQ is drafted.
Survey is scheduled, I think, is the only thing different. And Mike's met on site a couple different times, both to talk about some of the stormwater planning issues and then also with Chittenden Solid Waste District about that piece. But the survey is really still the thing that unlocks some of the next steps.
And then the summer schedule, everybody saw this and put on their calendar, and I would note that in September, that first Monday is Labor Day. So we'll actually be meeting on the second and third Mondays? Oh, okay, we skipped
That's
that.
the
Oh,
8:30
okay,
one is the-
got you. Yep. Yep.
So we're just directly going to Thursdays. I thought that there was
no.
something that we were doing Tuesdays.
I think we talked about it,
Oh,
but then
okay.
the last
All
time
right.
we said, we'll go right to Thursdays.
Okay.
Never made it out of committee.
Oh,
Okay, thank you.
SCABA on the 15th too, I forgot the return of that.
Yep. So in September, at this point, there's only one meeting scheduled. It'll be the third Monday,
Bless you.
okay?
Yes.
When are we scheduled in September to meet?
Back to Mondays.
But on
But
which Monday? in
It will
September?
only be the third
The
because
third Monday.
the first Monday is Labor Day,
Yep.
and we're meeting
So
the,
the 18th.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments on town administrator report? Next item is select board forum.
We got one, so.
Oh.
Saturday.
Who's
Green up
anything going
day.
on?
Huh?
Anything going on Saturday?
Well, there's a lot going on Saturday. Green Up Day, obviously the trash Phil's taken care of, all the picking up, the barbecue and whatnot. Also got 8 trees and a bunch of shrubs, and I put a front porch forum post on tonight looking for volunteers.
Good.
The tree warden, Paul Wizerack, will be up there to assist with the volunteers, dig the holes. So we're looking for 6 to 8 volunteers to come help plant those. The first 6 to 8 to contact me, you're the ones.
So are you're the contact for that?
I'm the contact
Okay.
just to set up the
Yeah.
the volunteers, and
Good.
we'll send them to Paul.
Yeah.
I
We
will
have,
be
the rec
unavailable.
crew has agreed to help with the lunch, help to do the lunch on the Bissonnette Fields. That takes it's a little bit more work, because here, everything's here. So that'll work fine, assuming the weather's good. We have the town hall as the safety valve if the weather's not good.
So my last Conservation Commission, we had a sign-up sheet for being up at the trucks, and
Yep.
I'm signed up for a time slot. It was, not everybody signed up, so I needed to do that. So I'm still planning to do that.
Okay,
Because I
yeah.
haven't heard that there's somebody standing in line to take my place.
All right. So we've got that manned, and we do have someone going to be here at 8:30 in the morning to man the donuts. There's always some donuts. And the map. And so if people are looking for where to green up, or they want to come and pick up their bags, or tell us where they've greened up, we'll be here and we'll coordinate
Mark it off
that.
on the map.
And then after lunch, we've got 3 or 4 trucks to go around and do the final pickups. So I think we're in good shape.
Can I ask that you assign somebody to take pictures specifically?
That's a great idea.
So we
I'll
have
try
some
to
photos.
do that, yeah.
Phil's in charge, I won't.
I know.
Phil's in charge, okay.
And I always take one at the end.
Yeah, I know,
The
but-
big truck full of stuff. I'm like, oh, I should take a
I'm
picture.
thinking, you know, maybe planting the trees.
Yep.
And
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
nice
we'll
if
try to
somebody
do
could
that. We'll try
This
to do
is,
that.
this is good town
Yeah.
report.
Yeah,
Select board
absolutely.
report at town meeting
you.
stuff, you know?
Good thinking.
Yep.
I'll
But if you
take
have
some
somebody
responsibility.
specifically responsible for that.
I will, yeah.
That would be great.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead.
There's a, go to greenupvermont.org, and there's contests for,
Videoing?
videoing for
Oh, that's right, I did
people
see that.
under 18. I think it's a 3-minute video, and
So I'll try to put something in Front Porch Forum about that activity too. Encourage people to consider that.
I don't know if we talked about this, but we got this last time, this auditor's report, and I would appreciate it if we could go through it, because it's kind of all new territory for me, and I think it's important that as select board people, we understand it.
So that would be a review of that.
Yeah. We'll add to the 15th, and by the time we conclude that meeting,
Okay.
it'll be the 25th probably, so.
All right.
That might have to be a June one, and it might be good to bring the auditors in if you have
Okay,
specific
yeah,
questions.
that's a
So,
good idea.
not that I'm trying to dodge that
No?
one, that's just a practical component.
Anything else for Front Porch Forum, for Select Board Forum? All right, so we'll consider approving the minutes from April 17th. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion for you.
Second it?
Okay, any discussion? Did you get to look at
Yeah,
it?
there was a few things that I
Okay.
missed. Yep. There's some names that were wrong.
Oh, I know I got the Shelburne guy's name. I saw it somewhere else, and I said, that's what his name is.
I actually
His name is
corrected-
Tim.
Sign in.
I actually corrected it when I posted it online.
I should have done that.
No, I know.
There was a, I don't remember where it was, but Mary, oh, there it is, right there. Third page, about a third of the way down, where it says Mary Beth Bowman feels the park was sold. I don't think it was her, I think it was Nancy Baker.
on page 2, under discuss of compensation funds, it should be not to challenge the eminent domain proceedings, not environmental domain.
Right.
Is that page 2?
Yes, page 2 under,
Anything else? We have captured those? Yeah?
Going once,
Yeah?
going twice.
Nothing.
Good?
Good.
Mary Lee, you good?
Yep.
And when you're ready, Andrea, no rush.
Ready to go.
All right, so the motion is to approve the minutes as corrected from April 17th, I think. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Consider approving the warrants, payroll and
I'll make that motion.
AP.
Second.
Any discussion? those in favor say aye.
Aye?
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. Unless there's an objection, a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye. 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 No opposed.